She died as a captain on the battlefield, and woke up in the body of a delicate duchess from a novel she hated. But this duchess is no victim. She will become a warrior and change her destiny. Within the special forces, drills were always carried out under the watchful gaze of Captain Lee Yoon. The troops scrambled to obey the captain's stern commands, mindful of her rigid standards. Although formidable in demeanor, Lee Yoon-ah possessed a magnetic charm, with a carefully styled hair that subtly highlighted her womanly grace. One weary recruit inquired whether she might ease her strictness, admitting that she was a source of intimidation for them all. After wiping perspiration from her brow and releasing a sigh, she declared, "You've only seen a fraction of what I'm capable of." Her words deepened their apprehension. Her reputation among the troops had earned her the devil in yielding lie strong, resilient, and top of her class at the academy. It was her resoluteness and remarkable skills that led her to become the academy spy and nearing female student captain. A bold young soldier taunted her with a spirit like yours. "You'll never find someone to match you." Lee Yoon-ah calmly answered that romantic pursuits and wedlock simply didn't interest her. Their conversation lingered on her commitment to a military career until a panting recruit dashed in, breathless from urgency. V rushed to relay the alarming news that the village housing their enemies had been obliterated. Concern etched into Lee Yoon-ah's features, and she guessed it was the work of the Y.S. faction. All at once, an enormous blaze and thunderous detonation engulfed the barracks, compelling the soldiers to seek immediate shelter. Shielding her visage with a steady hand, the captain instantly commanded the troops to take up positions, well aware that they were indeed under siege. The sweat streaked down Lee Yoon-ah's face as she struggled with confusion from somewhere. A frantic warning reached her ears. Missiles rained down in quick succession. One sailed squarely toward Lee Yoon. Although she herself was caught amidst the fiery swirl, she cried out to her team, "Everybody, take cover!" The tremendous shockwave hurled her sideways with a force that seemed almost otherworldly. The incoming blast shined, ever more ferociously, bordering on blinding, scorching imprints into startled eyes. Her entire existence paraded past her mind's eye in an instant. Yet suddenly, her eyes fluttered open. Within the haze of returning consciousness, she found herself lying in a magnificent, luminous bedroom. Disoriented but alive, Lee Yoon-ah mumbled, "Could it be? Did I survive?" No aches from the explosion plagued her body. Reality itself now seemed utterly transformed. The sensation of strangeness grew. She was surrounded by archaic, refined furnishings she could not recognize. The room glowed gently in white and traces of pale pink, warmed by soft morning sunlight that welcomed her back to waking life. The woman positioned herself upright upon the vast, sapphire-colored bed to get her bearings. To her astonishment, she beheld unexpected attire draping her form and exclaimed, "Seriously? I look like royalty in this dress." Lee Yoon-ah's hands thoughtfully explored the odd, snowy garment tied with blue ribbons, regarding it as something bizarrely otherworldly. Her bewildered mind's effort to grasp her predicament was swiftly jarred by a pronounced knock upon the grand, intricately adorned chamber doors. A matronly woman clad in a maid's ensemble quietly entered, murmuring, "Forgive me," only for the already vigilant Lee Yoon-ah to quickly intercept her and break the silence. That newly awakened woman seized the visitor's wrist with abruptness, startling her enough to elicit a small gasp. With a harsh, forceful twist, Lee Yoon-ah inched the woman's arm behind her back, provoking a louder cry of agony from the unfortunate lady. Pinning the shrieking servant flush against the recently entered door with both hands, terror twisted her features as she managed to choke out, "My lady?" Lee Yoon-ah aimed anxious questions upon the terrified servant, and, in a low threat, warned that without answers she'd slice her throat, only to learn her own body was frail as she moved. Despite recalling every fighting technique by heart, the poor woman remained pressed to the door, her fears rising in fresh wails. Between sobs, the servant cried, "Lady Rosalie!" The name, mirroring her spiraling mind, froze Lee Yoon-ah where she stood, still gripping the young woman, not truly thinking about her anymore. Sudden realization dawned. She spoke now, her own voice unrecognizable to her, as foreign as the lavish room and the unfamiliar dress. The servant, unwilling but helpless beneath the grasp, quaked and wept, "Lady Rosalie, my arm. I fear it will break. The pain is too much. Please release me. I beg of you." In a flash, Lee Yoon-ah let the shaken woman go, staring down at her own hands, which bore not a hint of her life before. Her new hands were slight, elegant, milky. They trembled faintly, lost to both frailty and confusion, feeling utterly unlike her own. Any soldier would have gazed enviously at her training scars, her bronzed, calloused hands, symbols of her tomboyish pride, all of which had now utterly vanished. The very spark that defined her, her strength and rugged charm, had disappeared in an instant, gone along with her familiar voice, as if someone simply stripped it from her soul. That was her existence. Lee Yoon-ah, stricken with fear, shouted, Mirror! She shook while Jiger, breathing quick with frightened rage. Despite her throbbing pain and fright, the servant gestured toward the mirror her frightened mistress demanded, and Lee Yoon-ah instantly made her way to it, paying no heed to the servant still trembling where she sat. Lee Yoon-ah confronted her reflection. Meeting unfamiliar eyes, she cried out, "You! What did you call me?" Lifting her chin, face drawn tight, she demanded of herself, "What on earth happened?" Staring back was a slender maiden with long, golden hair and eyes of amber. In a soft answer to her question, the maid replied that her title was Lady Rosalie J.U. Dayhart. Hearing this sent a fresh wave of shock through Lee Yoon-ah. She tore her gaze from the striking, unfamiliar face so unlike her own and turned the name over in her mind. Soon, she connected it. The name belonged to a character in a novel penned by her friend, a book debuting not long ago. Lee Yoon-ah had never taken a liking to romantic fantasy tales, and called Rosalie the heroine a pitiful soul even then. There are books one expects to challenge patience, needing a firm mind to persist, yet even with preparation, Lee Yoon-ah viewed Rosalie as the most miserable heroine she had known. Her friend always tried to soften her stance by explaining the plot celebrated those aiding the endearing main character, but Lee Yoon-ah found the novel relentlessly hard to enjoy. She admitted the protagonist was lovely and charming, but it still struck her as too unreal. Additionally, she couldn't bring herself to care for the hero trying to win over his beloved at any cost. To her, he seemed unhinged. Men fixated solely on romance simply weren't to her taste. Yet destiny now had her living through the very character she found contemptible, trapped within the role of hero, and consumed by love almost as though fate insisted, even beyond death, that she embody passion and self-sacrifice. Understanding this brought Lee Yoon-ah no solace. It meant she must now both govern a nation and feign a lover. And still, it's uncertain whether her story will trace that same written arc. Gazing at her transformed visage in the mirror and bracing herself on the table's edge, she exhaled despairingly, whispering, "This is absurd." It had been several days since Captain Lee Yoon-ah awoke in a storybook realm spun by her friend, and here she found herself living as a woman known only as Rosalie. Though the madness of her sudden arrival and surreal circumstances still lingered, she managed to acknowledge her new reality and come to terms with it. With every gentle sip of tea, the Rosalie of today mulled over the upheaval in her existence, disbelief warring with surrender. Though she had already embraced her destiny, she now existed inside her friend's novel, where, as the story dictated, the heroine was on the cusp of losing her powers because of secretive events. The history of that world communicated that 5 years prior, Rosalie Jutha's father had died, and ever since, she had drifted in a sea of uncontrollable sorrow. Her only family now was her stepmother, Bella, who remained behind with the grieving orphan girl. Rosalie's late father willed her a duchy descended from royal lineage, but with no other heirs. Custom dictated she should inherit all. Sadly, however, Rosalie's youth and shyness made her unfit yet for leadership, leaving her unready to accept the throne's weight. Thus, the reins of power slid into her stepmother's hands. Fragile and innocent, Rosalie found herself controlled and manipulated by Bella's cunning will. My stepmother happened to be exceptionally frugal, to such an extent that the household fell swiftly into destitution. Seeking even more trouble, Bella aligned herself with the Marquis of Windelch and waged war over land. Seizing on the chaos, she stole the family fortune and vanished without leaving clue or trace. With the aid of loyal supporters, Rosalie triumphed in battle, but this did not restore her noble status, relegating her to life as an impoverished aristocrat. Now, Lee Yoon-ah within Rosalie's body tapped her fingers against the desk in the rhythm of a pianoforte, reflecting deeply on how to set right both past wrongs and the main character's looming fate. A formidable dilemma loomed before her. Should she interfere with the narrative or permit the story to unfold as penned? Although the tale's conclusion remained unwritten, ought she abide by the plot's intent? At each plot twist, the protagonist yearned for anything but the inevitability heading her way. Resolved to plan for the future, the girl summoned Emma the servant, who she saw with suspicion on first acquaintance, and asked for writing supplies. Emma appeared quickly, nerves visible, clutching a tray for her lady. Rosalie grasped the pen tightly, brushed a fingertip to her delicate rose-tinted lips, then set about jotting down her ideas. Her resolve was simple: to ready herself for another territorial war for months off, this time with no allies from the original cast. Her strategy began with acquiring a mine to boost the duchy's resources. For her first taste of royal crisis, Malving, formerly foreign to a soldier's life, it was no small feat that her plan brimmed with such ingenuity. Her concluding thought had Lee Yoon-ah's hallmark: the forces must be strength and with an eye on military might. Rosalie reached over and took up a dainty golden bell in her graceful hands, ringing it lightly a few times in the silence. Right away the maid arrived and inquired, "Did you summon me?" Without rising from the writing table, The fair-haired royal replied, "He'll be stepping out. Lend me a hand with my attire." Though Emma doubted her mistress's identity, Rosalie simply listened to her tentative words, choosing not to reveal her secret. Still, she found herself uneasy about the servant, uncertain if Emma's loyalty would last through the final chapter of the tale. Remaining in character as the Duchess, Rosalie mused aloud, "Emma, have I ever truly displayed the authority expected of a duchy's ruler since my father's passing?" The maid could only whisper, "Oh, madam," sensing she was witnessing an entirely new side to her mistress, as though she'd become someone else in the tale. Rising determinedly from her seat and supporting herself on the table, Rosalie declared with resolve, "That will change." She pulled back from the table, raised her chin towards the distant mountain with audacious grace, and proclaimed herself the rightful duchess of these realms. Emma was utterly taken aback. Her face blushed with awkwardness as she managed only "Madame." The maid clenched at her apron in nervous tension, but, yielding to her lady's unmistakable resolve, she fell quiet for a breath before softly exhaling and volunteering to assist Rosalie with her outfit. Before long, Rosalie was resplendent in a dress of ivory and gold, arrayed like a gleaming rose, captivatingly beautiful on the surface, yet silently resilient within, much like stout branches. Eager curiosity made Emma yearn to discover her mistress's destination. With succinct firmness, Rosalie replied in a single word to the questioning maid title. This brief answer offered little clarity to those who wondered. Patiently, the Duchess requested that Emma refrain from addressing her as "my lady," confessing that it grated upon her nerves. Blushing with embarrassment, the maid apologized, this time addressing Rosalie properly as the Duchess, upon which Rosalie firmly cautioned her to be mindful of her formality henceforth. Worry tugged at Emma's mind, as she found herself preoccupied by the drastic transformation her mistress now exhibited. The Duchess, alongside her attendant, proceeded towards the training field of the Jothard estate. In solemn silence, Rosalie strode ahead, her servant trailing close behind her. Was spoke out of curiosity, at first calling "my lady," but swiftly correcting herself as she noticed the mark of irritation on the Duchess's face. With timid apprehension, the maid inquired why they had come to the estate's foremost training yard. Yet, before the Duchess could offer a reply, their objective revealed itself. To lads lounged idly, lost in conversation, until Rosalie's entrance startled them out of their reverie. The two youths saw her approaching, and, puzzled by her appearance, soon faced the ire of the Duchess, who, disregarding their uncertainty, rebuked them sharply. "Have you lost all sense?" Their exchange was abruptly halted by a deep, commanding male voice behind them. "Is something amiss?" Turning toward the new voice, Rosalie found herself before Knight Commander Aaron of Jothart, a stern veteran, scarred and indomitable, who still watched over these young men. Forgetting the prone boys, Rosalie now addressed this man distinguished by both charm and capability, explaining she sought out Commander Aaron, causing visible surprise to ripple across his features. The knight, careless in words, remarked that it seemed she no longer feared her stepmother. Rosalie returned dryly, quipping whether he himself would be afraid upon encountering a serpent, her sarcastic retort making him feel slightly awkward. Despite the faint tension lingering in the air, he let out a brief, half-mocking "ha," shaded with disbelief and maybe a hint of astonishment. Aaron then volleyed sharp questions at the Duchess, asking if she had turned into Bella's creature after being forced into spying, to which Rosalie, arms crossed gently in front of her, responded only with silence. While searching his expression, the Duchess pondered, "He won't meet my gaze, but he also shows no sign of retreat." She found his curious mix of confidence and avoidance distinctly fascinating. At length, a mask of composure gracing her face, she remarked dryly that, considering the nature of her reputation, his response was entirely to be expected. The leader of the knights, conversely, found himself taken aback by the Duchess's words and inquired with a hint of playful derision, while not forgetting his deference what troubled her mind. Rosalie, adopting an authoritative bearing, spoke, briefly pausing for effect. A hush fell, as though every ear belonged to her alone. She then pressed forward, questioning whether allegiance to his kin remained alive within him. This left the knight flustered and at a loss, bristling with indignation. And declared heartily, "Of course I do. My loyalty belongs to the noble house I have served for generations." His honor felt stung by these doubts. Following a thoughtful moment, Rosalie's lips gently curved in an approving smile. Ending the exchange with these final words, the Duchess left all farewells and spoke, and rifting away in silence, Emma trailing after her. Left behind, Aaron lingered in the unsettled air of their conversation, pondering the discomfort it had sparked. Later, as the knights drilled in the yard, the flaxen-haired ruler watched discreetly, closely observing and assessing their every misstep. The young men toiled in earnest to improve, and over several days, the Duchess continued to watch in silence. 6 days circled by in this tense, pattern the Duchess' renowned knights pressed on, visibly drained. Rosalie inwardly marveled at the lack of stamina in those fated to guard her domain. At last, Commander Aaron noticed her presence, releasing a nervous breath as he queried about her purpose here. Emerging elegantly from her hiding place, the Duchess answered calmly, "I'm observing their training," hoping she would commend his leadership. The commander pressed for her opinion on their prowess. Crossing her arms atop the equipment pile, she candidly retorted, "It's truly abysmal." This displeased Aaron, who quickly rebuffed her as exaggerating. Rosalie's eyes, burnished gold, gazed at him intently in a quiet but powerful stare. In that moment, the man came to sense something in her, a force he hadn't imagined from the once delicate and reserved Duchess. Even though Lee Yoon-ah lived worlds away and inhabited an other's form, the commanding energy she had forged endured now. It was the bearing of an expert knight. Not far off, behind them, the exhausted young knights pleaded for respite. To Rosalie's seasoned gaze, it was clear they stood no chance should real combat come. Her heart reserved some hope, however certain that, with effort, greater feats were within them. Bereaved, puzzled by her conviction, with hands balled tight enough to bring the veins forth, he protested, "You pay no regard to the genuine promise within our ranks." Rosalie extended her hand in earnest, offering, "Suppose I lend my help, what would you say?" Sunlight caught on her wrist, shining off her fair skin like dew-laden petals. Aaron answered gravely, "Do you really believe you can? You realize Bella isn't likely to permit such a thing." Duchess assured him that with their effort, triumph was not out of reach, and that it would be worthwhile. Some hours slipped by after this encounter before Rosalie turned to new concerns, inquiring of her maid about whether Bella had dismissed the estate's venerable butler. In declaring her intent to oppose her stepmother's machinations, she sent a shiver of alarm through her attendant's face. Chilled to the bone, Emma replayed her lady's startling command in her mind again and again, completely unable to accept its reality. Attempting to halt Bella felt as vain as standing before a thundering tidal wave. The rattled maid called out, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, "Oh no, should Bella discover this, we're doomed to this." Rosalie responded quietly and curtly, "I am a duchess." She let the breath slip between her lips, eyelids falling shut as she uttered calmly, "Settle yourself, Emma." Seeking a change in topic, Rosalie drew from her lilac-hued sleeve a modest scrap of paper, neatly folded, extending it to Emma along with a single humble plea. 3 days' time drifted by. Rosalie busied herself in the study until a soft trapping halted her activities. Clothed in rich green with documents fanned around her, the young woman responded to the knock, her voice a gentle, soothing invitation, "You may enter." As the door swung open, there stood Emma, presenting Dolan, the venerable butler who had for decades overseen the Duchy of Art, to his lady. With a polite bow, the elderly man with silvery whiskers and a monocle perched by his left, I greeted her. "It has been some time, your grace, Duchess." Rosalie laced her fingers and let her chin come to rest atop them, her gaze studying the seas and attendant as she said, "Your presence tells me you still serve this household." Her striking yellow eyes stayed locked on him, serious and unwavering in their intensity. After being dismissed, Dolan had taken up residence beyond the kingdom's heart. On Rosalie's behalf, Emma had set out to track him down and relay a message. At her mistress's urging, the loyal maid swiftly located the retired butler the same day and passed along a fold of paper cunningly marked with a discreet link. Rosalie wondered what Emma had managed to say to bring him back. The maid insisted she conveyed her transformation, how vastly she had grown to someone new. Dolan accepted that Rosalie was indeed changed, and with conviction in her voice, she stated it was now an era of renewal, then asked if he would once again join their household. With a deep bow, one knee to the floor and hand resting reverently on his chest, the butler responded with dignified urgency, "Yes, please allow me to serve your house anew." Soothed by his honorable words and commitment, a faint but genuine smile touched Rosalie's previously impassive countenance. One more hindrance that clung to the spectral shadow haunting Rosalie in that novel was her inability to bear the ancestral signet of her family. But circumstances had shifted today. The Duchess carefully opened a jewelry case, discovering within it the box containing the illustrious emerald ring. Slipping the treasured ring upon her elegant finger, she vowed with lips moving in solemn ritual, "I am determined to rewrite this destiny of mine." Elsewhere in her quarters, Bella raised her voice fiercely at the attendants. "I've ordered Rosalie be brought to me," only to be answered curtly that a meeting could take place in her stepdaughter's office, should she desire one. The official Duchess, Bella Dearth J. Ut's heart circled her chambers, pondering the nature of Rosalie's intentions. Was she perhaps aspiring to adopt the role of Duchess herself? Her lips, glossed in a shade reminiscent of summer roses, formed each utterance with the precision and ace of rosebush thorns, every word containing bristling intent. She must face the girl directly. Thus, without so much as a warning knock, she strode into the office where her stepdaughter worked, calling repeatedly for Rosalie in a cadence as brisk as her fury. For her part, Rosalie maintained tranquil composure behind the desk, silently reflecting by now, as was her custom, on strategies to restrain her stepmother's next cruel mischief. Bella seethed to see Rosalie's serene expression unmoved by the storm of her own noisy entrance. Rushing headlong at the true Duchess, her auburn hair streaming, Bella shouted sharply right in Rosalie's face, "Can you not hear me?" The young woman turned her gaze toward the loud and flustered lady, her eyes wordlessly voicing the sentiment, "She's unbearably loud." Regardless, this woman's temper was precisely as depicted in the book. Rosalind felt there could be no title more fitting for her than supernatural serpent, for she seemed determined to drive out her own stepdaughter by scolding. How ill-mannered! Is this Riley's influence? From Bella's view, it appeared the girl's only interest was the name Riley, which surely belonged to Rosalie's mother. Lee Yoon, a spirit, carried memories of her past mother, who once taught her, if anyone hurts you, seize them by the neck. This lesson was backed by generations of military service within her family. Truly, discipline and the weight of kin had come to guide her life, instilling within her an unshakable self-assurance. However, joining the military revealed to her a simple lesson, and despite varying tongues and customs, what was ingrained at home had little place within army ranks. That day, she became fully aware, to Bella's dismay, Rosalie suddenly rose from her seat. Her palms met the table in a sharp report that made the woman flinch, the surface still covered by what she'd been writing. Rosalie pronounced, "I've grown weary of this hierarchy." With the new authority in her voice, Bella felt further unsteady, almost diminishing before her stepdaughter. Instinctively, Bella yelled back, striving to reassert control, "Cease this pretense of running the household, or I'll dismiss your butler a second time." Consumed by both anger and alarm that her manipulations no longer held sway over the late Duke's child, Bella met the girl's grave question concerning Bellad. Dareth J.U.D. Hart's true identity with little more than a voice quaking. What? In a state of outrage, Bella noticed her authority dissolvent, desperate, lifted her hand for a slap, exclaiming, "How could you address me so impertinently?" Yet, before the blow could land, Rosalie seized her wrist, the one graced with an emerald ring, arresting it firmly in mid-motion. The red-haired lady's knuckles, curled as though holding, quivered in panic. She felt utterly powerless, now dreading her stepdaughter even as she wailed for reprieve, unable to comprehend such loss of influence, vowing that tomorrow she must recommence her training anew. With sudden release, Rosalie let go and Bella stumbled back, belting a dramatic wail, as if the girl's grasp had delivered a sharper torment. Humiliated and stammering in discomfort, the woman spat vindictive lie. "You!" voice stinged with a menacing resonance. Even Rosalie's crisp and unhesitating response is solitary. I sent the elder woman's scowl contorting into an anxious cringe. Regarding Bella, who shuddered on the ground, Rosalie finished, "The 7th Duchess of House J.U.D. Hart." She declared with chilling resolve that Bella's only role was that of honorary duchess, demanding her due respect with a gaze as chilling as a grave. Horrified, Bella gazed back, nearly paralyzed by fear which grew as the young duchess reaffirmed, "Is that clear to you?" And Bella remained silent. Rosalie insisted on a reply, her timbre as imperious as that of the fiery hoodie entered earlier, and Bella, cornered, stuttered, "Why has says yes?" Having gotten her answer, Rosalie concluded the matter by summoning Dolan, who entered without delay at the sound of the Duchess's call. Turning her resolved look on the disoriented woman, she instructed Dolan to escort the proper Duchess back to her chambers. The butler took charge with poise, Curtiswell's requesting that Bella accompany him. A short time after Bella and Rosalie J.U.D. Hart's dense conflict, the captain of the knights marched into the study. Swinging the door open, he announced in a ringing tone, "Duchess, have you sent for me?" At first, the gentleman failed to take in the entire scene, but once he did, the revelation caught him off guard. Before him stood Dolan, gracefully pouring tea for his Duchess, and remarking to the knight, "It's been quite a while, Aaron." Meanwhile, Rosalie was poised with quill and paper, her gaze rising to acknowledge Aaron as he entered. With a pleased stride, the gentleman approached and exclaimed merrily, "So the whispers were right." Dolan returned this with a gentle smile. In an exuberant tone, Aaron mentioned that the Duchess had put Bella in her place. However, Rosalie had no wish for conversation, tossing the words at him sharply, demanding he concentrate on his duties. With a steadier breath, Aaron composed himself, seated across from the Duchess, and said nervously, "All right, I understand." Without delay, Rosalie started a discussion about strengthening the knight's stamina, much to Aaron's astonishment. She noted, too, that it was time to raise the knight's wages, prompting the commander to confirm if those were truly her intentions. Rosalie passed her husband detailed advice concerning training, also declaring her wholehearted dedication to assist them in their exercises. Aaron examined the list of orders, a set of tasks that struck him as extremely onerous. The mention of 2,000 push mining a mountain peak, and a handful of other challenges all felt entirely impossible to the commander, leaving him lost for words. Lifting her tea, Rosalie said before sipping, "I told you I would support you in restoring the knight's honor, didn't I?" Taking a thoughtful sip, a brief pause in her speech, the Duchess remarked that her training sessions would commence in several weeks. It dawned on Aaron that the increase in wages stemmed from tailored training demands, immediately adding, "Yes, it will take great effort to discipline them, and given the current perception of the order, I grasp why the Duchess has taken this route." Returning the cup to the saucer, she continued in a formal tone, "Commander Aaron, recalling the Duchy's history, she pressed on. Once, our lineage possessed the most esteemed brotherhood of knights. How do you find our knights today?" Looking squarely into Aaron's eyes, she stated plainly that the new training would commence in a week's time. Recognizing the rigorous effort soon required, Aaron realized his acceptance was inevitable, so he agreed, promising to keep the Duchess informed. As he exited the study, he encountered Emma. She was surprised to see him, but greeted him brightly, and he returned the salutation, noting her quietly enchanting demeanor. Beaming, Emma approached, clasping in her hand a letter which she explained came directly from the Duchess. Rosalie reached forward curiously and inquired, "A letter? Who is it from?" She accepted a delicately ribbed and pink letter, the cover marked from Sonia Min's. Sonia's name belonged to a radiant, kind-hearted young woman cherished as Rosalie's friend. Up with interest, Emma said, "It's quite some time since Lady Sonia last visited. What has she written?" Having finished the letter, Rosalie announced, "We'll be hosting a visitor in 2 weeks. Prepare everything for a warm welcome." Within the narrative, Sonia was already aware of Rosalie's troubles by this moment. It was also clear the crown prince would play a role, news which provided scant comfort for Rosalie now. Confident in her resourcefulness, the heroine was assured of handling things alone and felt there was no necessity for their interventions. She lifted her gaze to the maid and inquired, "Emma, has there been any update on what I mentioned last time?" To which the attentive maid cheerily replied, "Dolan promised to bring it the day after tomorrow." Herzegovina rested against my hand with a pleased smile and remarked, "Is that so? How delightful. 7 days have slipped by. Today was meant to mark the commencement of training." Every young man who prided himself as a knight was already assembled on the grounds. The commander, standing among them, was struck motionless the instant he caught sight of the Duchess's attire. Rosalie donned a pale shirt and a dark, strapped skirt. A cap perched on her head and slim gloves adorned her hands. This look diverged entirely from a Duchess's typical wardrobe. Someone among the knights guessed that she was garbed for practice. Her attire promptly became the subject of everyone's conversation. The young men assumed, knowing nothing of her history, that besting the Duchess would be no challenge since she seemed frailer than they. Still, her conduct continually startled those around her, causing Emma in particular needless concern. With a small adjustment to the cap, Rosalie exhaled and finally declared, "Let's commence. All units, proceed to the field at once." Not a single soul responded as the Duchess recounted her tale. She was forced to raise her voice, demanding an answer as to why they lingered, and repeated her directive. A particularly bold knight retorted that he refused. Disregarding the lady's authority, he continued without respect, "It's irrelevant if you're a Duchess or not, we will not heed you, believing you incapable, even if you fancy yourself fit to lead training." Rosalie advanced toward them, serenely questioning the young man's identity. Emma felt apprehension rising, sensing trouble was imminent. The knight commander, resigned to the hopelessness of the situation, announced Rosalie's inquisitive query and informed her this was Toronto, the eldest knight of their esteemed order. The Duchess regarded him curiously, surprised that such a pristine fellow held such distinguished status. Yet suspicion lingered in her mind, prompting her to ask, "Do you mean to say that this gentleman is the eldest of the honored knights?" She drew her slight blade, leveled it at him, and commanded him to take up his own weapon at once. Aaron endeavored to halt the Duchess, reminding her exactly whom she was about to challenge. She simply tossed aside her cap, remarking that such things were unimportant. Gripping her sword with her gloves of warm black hue, Rosalie readied herself with assured movements. Now standing solidly in a combat pose, the Duchess waited expectantly for her foe to strike first, radiating confidence. The men broke out in laughter at her display of certainty, and Toronto sneered, "Are you honestly confident in your posture?" With these words lingering, the esteemed knight unsheathed his blade with a self-assured gesture. Before the duel began, Toronto added, Just see that you don't come to regret this, and surged forward to confront the Herzogovina, Ennis with intent to strike. With an artful and near-invisible gesture, Rosalie dipped low. Using that subtlety, she slipped seamlessly into the unsuspecting heart of Toronto. Her maneuver caught everyone off guard. Although Rosalie faced consequences herself, the force of the response left her onto reeling and off balance. Planting her foot triumphantly atop the fallen knight, the Duchess declared sternly, "On a real battlefield, you would have lost your head." With breathless resignation, Toronto faltered and sealed, eyeing him with mild disappointment. Rosalie questioned, "So this is when you so quickly surrender?" Noticing the alarm in his eyes, she pressed on. "How can a knight let go of resolve so readily?" Raising her chin, the Duchess addressed the astonished knights arrayed nearby, dictating firmly, "Even at the cost of your life, surrender must not cross your mind. Is that understood?" Suddenly, her name rang out like a comforting cup of hot chocolate, echoing across the arena. Rosalie turned to the sound. Behind her was Sonia Mins, bright with warmth, her hand aloft in delighted greeting. The Duchess mused that perhaps her training had begun at an inopportune moment. Yet, her notice was also captured by the striking gentleman at Sonia's side. He seemed taken aback by Rosalie's conduct. In the drawing room, Sonia's very first intent was to inquire eagerly about her dear friend's circumstances. Bringing the teacup to her lips and wearing a facade of indifference, Rosalie replied, "No big deal. Best to forget about it." Rosalie regarded her friend, as if weighing her thoughtfully. Observing this sweet-hearted young woman with brown hair, earnest leaf-green eyes, clad in a soft yellow gown, with an air of innocence, the protagonist mused that she fit the image exactly. Turning her attention to the man accompanying them, she concluded that Derivis seemed more distant and severe than she had anticipated. Choosing not to respond, Sonia simply took a quiet sip of her tea. An extended, uneasy hush settled around the three, with no one daring enough to break it. Seeking to dispel the tension, Sonia at last ventured, "Hey, Rosalie, shall we have tea again tomorrow? I recall your fondness for it." The new Rosalie, staying cautiously within her role, accepted and promised she would see to preparations. A pink glow blossomed across Sonia's face as she exclaimed joyfully, "I can hardly wait. And look, this spring, the garden's flowers are blossoming early. Let's see them, shall we?" Rosalie, frost in her tone, mentioned she had other business and asked Dolan to escort the visitors out. Instantly, disappointment clouded the face of the girl in yellow, startled by her friend's coldness. With no hint of feeling, Rosalie watched as the door solemnly closed after Sonia's departure. Looking forward again, she became suddenly aware of Derivis observing her intently. Their gazes locked in silent contest for what felt an eternity. Rosalie sensed a battle of minds was underway. With a slight, knowing smile, the man remarked, "Am I mistaken, or do you meet my eyes much more willingly now?" She met his eyes without faltering and responded, "I have done nothing to warrant blame." As he straightened his posture, he exhaled, "Then could it be that you erred at an earlier time?" Derivis Ville Odeke wore the title of Crown Prince in the realm. He earned deep admiration, renowned for his prowess as a formidable master of Sordora. According to the novel's account, he and Rosalie were utterly dissimilar. If it hadn't been for Sonia, they might never have exchanged words. Yet the heroine is convinced that after the Great War ends and the titanium quarries are safeguarded, he will disappear from the tale altogether. Seeking to draw their awkward talk to an end, Rosalie gently set aside her teacup and mentioned she must return to her duties at the construction site. With measured steps, Derivis fell in behind the Duchess. Without warning, she pivoted gracefully and said as courteously as she could, "Your Highness, if you're searching for the garden, it lies the other way." He answered curtly, expressing his intention to observe the situation at the worksite instead. Perplexed, Rosalie inquired, "What makes the Crown Prince take such interest in the training of my knights?" In the story, Aaron had grown disappointed in Rosalie, and manipulated by Bella, had left the duchy to side with Derivis. But this time, the heroine is determined and not to lose Aaron. Politely, Rosalie requested that he refrain from coming so the knights might focus on their tasks. Once more, a tense, silent power struggle unfolded for Rosalie, though it lasted only a brief moment. Derivis relented, stating he would attend at another time. Yet after offering this, he bent nearer to the somewhat startled Herzogovina, and with a sly, playful expression, remarked, "Have you heard that I never grant anyone's requests, princess?" The main character still retains her impressions from a previous existence. To her, His mind is as devious as the book once revealed. Realizing it was pointless to argue with royalty, she went to change into her attire for the drills. The heroine remained steadfast in her habits even in this new life. She pushed herself relentlessly in practice. She sensed herself slipping back into the social facade of her past now. She is not merely a gentle duchess, but a force to be reckoned with. Gazing at the exhausted knights, a thought drifted through her mind. Much remains before I reach my ruin. The one source of pride came from overcoming Toronto and earning the knight's esteem. Still, even if he continued to underestimate her, she realized she might have been defeated nonetheless. Rosalie's thoughts kept returning to why Araviz regarded her with curiosity. His conduct seemed to run counter to the story, for there it was never suggested that he cared for Rosalie in any way. The protagonist wondered aloud whether her transformation was the root cause that she had become utterly unlike the former Rosalie she had once been. Her train of thought was soon derailed by the entry of the one who inspired such contemplation. Araviz was striding resolutely toward the practice yard. She pivoted in his direction, and with a relaxed tone he remarked, "Have you prepared yourself for the day's lesson?" Rosalie inquired about his presence, to which Araviz, dressed in a practice shirt, responded, "I came to train. I didn't expect to find the Duchess here too." Turning away and lifting my chin in a small gesture of dismissal, I wished him a productive session, all the while attempting to brush off any awareness of him. Yet, when Araviz delved into his exercises, something irresistible about him pulled at her attention. He had settled into a lotus posture, eyes gently sealed, radiating deep, unwavering focus. Rosalie observed him with curiosity awakened. An azure radiance, shaped like a sphere, enveloped Araviz. It was the hallmark of aura cultivation, a force wielded by the masters of the sword. Struck with admiration, the Duchess addressed him as, "Your Highness, Crown Prince." Rosalie expressed her wish to witness the process, and Araviz, without opening both eyes, glanced her way and asked, "So it intrigues you?" Turning slightly her way, he began his explanation. One's aura is often reflected in the hue they carry in their eyes. The Duchess leaned in to examine his glowing palm, which mirrored the shade of his gaze, asking permission to touch this strange light. Sinking lower beside him, she listened as he remarked, "I doubt you'll notice any sensation." The protagonist delicately pressed her index finger against his outstretched palm. A twinge of dismay flickered within the Duchess. She had imagined a warmth, but the aura yielded no feeling. Bathed in puzzlement, he gazed at her silently. Then, at last, he spoke. "I have never seen you behave this way before." Vaughn observed him in turn. Their eyes lingered, this time less encumbered by discomfort. With an unruffled air he added, "Your face is seldom so unguarded. Only now do I truly see you." His meaning rightly struck the Duchess, for it referred to what Rosalie believed was unattainable, and she gave her affirmation aloud. After a moment's pause, she simply said, "How fascinating." Araviz suddenly confessed, "I heard whispers calling you the Devil's Duchess." When she queried him, he smiled and offered to reveal more. He elaborated the knights often spoke about their mistress. Araviz joked about doubling their routine. He mentioned as well that when she revealed her intimidating side, it proved effective in maintaining discipline. Rising gracefully from the earth, Araviz commented, "Eyes as lovely as yours hardly suit the name of the devil." He concluded warmly, "Whatever the case, should you wish to call upon me or see me, simply say the word." She responded with indifferent coolness that meeting him once sufficed, so he bid his farewell with a gentle smile and a wave. The interaction irked her slightly, yet she carried on with her training. The heroine found herself perplexed as to why his sudden fascination had turned toward her, when in the original story he never bestowed such looks upon Rosalie. Exercising caution became her choice. Several days on, the Duchess greeted her former visitors in the garden. Sonia couldn't help but turn to her friend and joyfully exclaim, "Rosalie." The hostess was already positioned before the tea table and graciously beckoned her guests. Familiar with her friend's temperament, Sonia almost rhetorically inquired, "Rosalie, aren't you coming to join us?" With a composed sip of her tea, which she then gently set aside, the heroine announced she would participate this time. Within the novel's pages, Bella and the Marquis of Windle enjoyed a close companionship, often conspiring in secret about the business of war. Sonia's thoughts drifted to the strong-willed Rosalie, pondering her absence. She recalled that their last encounter was during Rosalie's packing and departure. As Rosalie mentioned, Bella had retreated to the villa. Their exchange was unexpectedly cut short by a surprise arrival. Everyone turned to identify who approached from behind. Rosalie, unable to contain her reaction, thought to herself ruefully, just as I thought, trouble appears. Putting on a friendly air, Bella said, "It is a true honor to meet you, Your Highness, the Crown Prince of the Empire." The woman beamed to add honesty to her words. No one had truly anticipated her entrance. Daraviz and Sonia stared at her in astonishment, while Rosalie averted her gaze and sighed softly. Assuming an air of importance, Bella said, "Rosalie, you never mentioned the Crown Prince would stop by." Sonia struck the table with her fist, and although shy about it, rose in defense of her friend, insisting, "That's not the case." Rosalie's expression was undeniably sour, and she addressed her with controlled anger. "Why are you so concerned?" Feeling flustered, Bella attempted to impress the Crown Prince, pointing out her status as the late Duke's wife. Rosalie rose from her seat and calmly stated, "And I hold the title of Duchess of the J.U.D. Hart family." Whilst the former Duke's wife tried to protest, she was briskly interrupted by the arriving young lady. "That means my instructions must be obeyed." As happened at their previous gathering, the Duchess directed Dolan to accompany Bella back to her chamber. The butler stepped forward, addressing the noble Duchess with formality. "This way, my lady." The commotion greatly infuriated Bella, who had anticipated maintaining her authority over Rosalie and all else indefinitely. Anxious and incensed, she lifted her hand toward Dolan and exclaimed, "How dare you behave this way?" Yet, swift as ever, Rosalie intercepted her gesture, stopping her hand in the air once again. Was Bella shook with a mixture of pain and dread? Rosalie remarked with poise, "Surely, you wouldn't wish to have the knight seize you before our distinguished guests." She continued, her tone edged with caution, "It would be best for you to make your exit quietly." Daraviz found inspiration in the Duchess's words. A smile of astonishment graced his features. Surveying the situation, he chose to add emphasis, seeking to press Bella further, announcing that he, too, was left uninformed of her arrival. He stated further, "Only the Duchess determines who will be notified about what." Those words stirred even greater ire within Bella. With an irritated stride, she made for the exit, while Rosalie serenely resumed her place among the guests. A frightened female voice, calling her by name, momentarily captured her attention. Cheerfully and clearly afraid, Sonia inquired, "Are you really the Rosalie I remember?" Though sympathy flickered at her friend's outpouring, she curtly affirmed, and Sonia added, "I simply didn't expect you to stand up against Bella like that." When calm returned in part, Sonia timidly murmured, "It feels as though you've become someone else entirely." Fearing she had wounded Rosalie with her words, Sonia rushed to suggest that something difficult must have happened to inspire the change. To this, Rosalie simply answered, "I understand." Abruptly shifting to a brighter demeanor, Sonia pronounced Rosalie's renewed fortitude a comfort to her own heart. Bursting with positive emotion, Sonia claimed she might cry from relief, prompting a slight, knowing smile from Rosalie, just as she had foreseen. Some time flowed by. Rosalie and Dolan wandered the corridors deep in discussion over the matter of who might be the next general officer, the Duchess already harboring a preferred candidate. Dolan wondered aloud whom she had chosen, but before he found out, someone started heading directly toward them, causing a pause in their talk. Their visitor was a sharp-shored gentleman, Neon by name, one Mime Jem, general officer, now Bella's assistant. Upon seeing them, he declared, "There is something I must speak to you about." Rosalie bid him proceed, and he forced out, teeth clenched, "How could you do this? You cast Bella aside, abandon her in such a state." He raged over being relieved of his duties, yet all the wealth that he and Bella unjustly siphoned and from the duchy's coffers could never be recompensed. With a short sigh, Rosalie remarked, "A sense of right seems foreign to you." He lashed back irately, insisting his service to this house spanned years. Attempting to coerce her, Neon warned that if she merely dismissed him, he would pardon this once, but should she proceed, consequences with Bella would follow. Rosalie's hand quivered, her fingers curling into a fist, tempted as she was to show him the dignity of decorum by force. Even so, she understood that this man was not a soldier, so she needed to exercise patience toward him. Yet, she resolved to assert her authority with grace, remarking that she possessed a list documenting his misdeeds, which would surely cost him his position. Just then, the commander hurried up behind Rosalie, shouting after her. For the Duchess, his arrival was most fortuitous, so she instructed him to escort the man away from the Neon estate. Aaron inquired if she was referring to the man present before her. Dion quaked with anxiety. He was loath to confront him. Aaron's gaze gleamed with a predator's intensity as he announced, "Let me handle this fellow." The commander hauled Neon off, the latter protesting in terror. Given Aaron's prior suffering at his hands, this seemed rightful retribution. Once the two were gone, Dolan addressed the Duchess. "By the way, Your Grace, about that gentleman we had been discussing." Rosalie answered, Bring the man called Erudite. The bellhop, with a humble bow, replied, "Of course." She spoke of a man who, uniquely, was the first of common birth to finish the academy with top honors and serve as the crown prince's aide. In this world, for Rosalie, he stood among those whose abilities she meant to employ. Rosalie and Sonia occupied seats in one of the grand halls. Sonia animatedly recounted something her father had gifted her. The Duchess, half-minded, distracted as she reviewed her papers, absently replied, "Indeed, it's lovely." A sudden voice at the door disturbed their nearly shared moment with the announcement, "Duchess, Erudite has arrived for you." Rosalie bade him enter. Sonia felt discomfited, as her chat had turned into a one-sided discourse. A well-dressed, fair-haired man wearing spectacles stepped into the entryway. Perceiving that Rosalie's attention lay elsewhere, Sonia declared, "All right, I'll just leave now." With no reply forthcoming from her companion, she made for the exit. Rosalie, meanwhile, simply turned her attention to the guest, whom she invited to take a seat. As the door fell shut, Sonia was still gazing back at her friend. She scarcely recognized the person Rosalie had become. With perfect posture and hands calmly folded, Rosalie inquired, "Are you ready to begin your duties tomorrow?" Erudite listened attentively, and Rosalie explained the schedule would be demanding, requiring additional effort beyond the norm. The man stopped her, uneasily remarking that it felt like he was being interviewed for a position, and that Shed made her choice without input from him. Rosalie soothed his concern, assuring that identifying gifted individuals was her custom. He admitted she was right. She questioned him, asking if he had perhaps reconsidered. He admitted that he had not. Removing his spectacles to clean them, he remarked upon how strange it was for someone of common birth like himself to be offered such a role. However, a rather obscure character from the book hinted that his appointment could serve to obscure the illicit activities of the previous official. Rosalie assured them she had no intention of following such a course. She continued, "As mentioned before, my choice fell on you because of your gift. He is private, dauntless, but lacks sympathy." Inwardly, Rosalie was certain that he possessed an uncanny ability to see through anyone. When their talk drew to a close, Erudite remarked, "Understood. May I begin my duties tomorrow?" The Duchess responded, "Certainly. We'll have a room readied for you at the manor," and bid him farewell. Erudite departed the study, yet he hesitated in the hall once the door shut. Internally, he mulled over a thought. Is it just my impression? Or is the talk of the Duchess being frightfully meek completely untrue? He considered her anything but timid, and perceived her as steadfast in her actions. It amazed him that she recognized the merit of someone from humble origins like himself. In fact, she appeared to be an adept noblewoman honed by rigorous experience. Yet Sonia, waiting before the manor, as though she anticipated him, disrupted Erudite's contemplation. With a warm demeanor, she inquired about how matters had unfolded with Rosalie. Referring back to her own chat with her companion, she mentioned too that the Duchess was not freely conversational and wondered if understanding had been reached. She softly added, "If you are troubled by anything, please feel free to seek me out." He continued along, replying, "Everything's all right, see you." Yet his mind shifted despite not knowing Sonia. Erudite had learned of her closeness with the crown prince, and his preliminary judgment had not been positive. He also suspected that she was rather susceptible to feelings and apt to err. While moving across the gardens, Rosalie noticed Despised, to whom she posed the question of his reason for being there. He neglected a direct reply but cheerfully proposed borrowing a horse for a ride, inviting the Duchess, who was unsettled in these fantastical surroundings. For Rosalie, unaccustomed to horseback, this stood as a gentle caution. She explained the circumstances, her intent to politely dismiss him manifest by noting her lack of riding skill and stating she would have staff assist him. For a heartbeat, he stood grinning, silent. Then, with a cheerful tone, he remarked that he was hoping the Duchess would introduce him to a steed. Yet, his shifting temper rubbed her the wrong way. She turned away, saying simply, "Then come along." She disguised her annoyance by squaring her shoulders. At last, they reached the stables, nestled in a meadow encircled by summery peaks. Herzegovina faced the row of stalls, and announced that he was welcome to select whichever horse he wished to ride. She was poised to depart then, offering the crown prince genial wishes for an enjoyable outing. However, no sooner had she left the stalls than Despised's voice called after her, inviting her to ride. Standing with a glossy brown horse, he remarked, "After all, what splendid weather we have." Not waiting for her response, he added, "Take a seat, he'll take care of the reins." The Duchess quietly considered her attire. She breathed out in resignation, lamenting the bothersome dress. The leading lady felt perturbed, fearing an awkward moment could arise. Then, with sudden resolve, she stepped forward, uttering a light cha, as if it were a trivial feat. The owners already stood in the clearing alongside their mount, as Rosalie gripped the saddle, preparing to climb up. Despised rubbed his neck, and requested a bit of assistance. He softly added, "Then, forgive my forwardness," as he carefully encircled her delicate waist. He lifted her smoothly, setting her atop the horse with care. She emitted a small as she settled awkwardly, prompting Deriv to gently remind her that growing accustomed took time. Without a word, the crown prince mounted behind Rosalie and seized the reins himself. Clinging nervously, the heroine asked, "Didn't you say you'd only steer?" But he just smiled and assured her she would find joy in the ride. He cautioned the Duchess that the ride was to begin, advising her to rest back against him at ease. With Deriv's call of Haya, their trio swept off like a wild wind, the rushing air overwhelming Rosalie. Rosalie was filled with a marvelously new sensation unlike anything she'd known. She squeezed her eyes shut, surrendering all thought for a breath, immersing herself in the rhythmic movement atop the steed. They seemed wrapped in a radiant vision, an aura shimmering as if edged with light. Rosalie opened her eyes, the beauty of nature glowing in their depths. They paused in a sea of ripening wheat, just as the sun began to dip beyond the horizon. Surveying the breathtaking scenery, Derivis remarked, "I never realized such corners existed on these lands." The sunlight glinted through his hair. Rosalie answered, "I feel the same." Silently, they gazed at the evening sky as it glowed for a lingering moment. At last, Derivis made up his mind and rose from where he sat. Planting his feet in the earth, he extended his arm and said, "Let me take your hand." He assisted her upright, and once she was standing, she gently dusted off her palm. He reached out again, with friendly intent towards Rosalie. Yet, a sudden gust interrupted the moment, vexing him with its abrupt intrusion. He resolved to share, an old superstition claiming the wind carries away all troubles. He wholeheartedly trusted this notion. Rosalie hesitated, lost in contemplation. She eventually responded, "Regarding your troubles, I'm unsure." She then added serenely, "Though I do wish they find their solution soon." A tinge of sorrow tinged his countenance, as though reminded of something awkward from his past. But he swiftly adopted a lighter look and remarked, "You don't seem all that interested in my worries." He quietly commended her candor and her refusal to flatter him needlessly. Under the soft touch of the summer breeze, golden stalks of millet moved scarcely at all. In private musings, Derivis noted that, even with her vacant stare, there was something he found captivating about her. Back at the manor, all were anticipating the return of the Duchess and the Crown Prince. Emma positioned herself calmly by the entrance gate. She watched Sonia, seemingly searching for someone or something in the distance. Curiously, she inquired if the girl needed help, and received a gentle reply, "I haven't spotted Devi and Rosalie." The maid surmised they had gone out riding, and just then familiar voices echoed as they neared the residence. Emma, with a playful gesture, announced, "Here they come." Both Emma and Derivis arrived on horseback at the estate, and began to converse quietly. Sonia couldn't exactly say she was pleased by the announcement. Her fingers trembled with bitterness as she murmured to herself, insisting he would never act like this. Emma, startled by Sonia's reaction, gently inquired, "Lady Sonia?" He never could have imagined witnessing such behavior from Sonia. Displeased, Sonia quickly formed a new plan. Advancing, she approached the Duchess's attendant. Turning her gaze on her, she considered that Emma was easily unsettled. Trying to mask her motives with kindness, she laid a hand on the servant's shoulder and offered, "It must be tough for you, now that Rosalie has changed." With her grip firming, Sonia went on, "Perhaps I could offer Rosalie some guidance, you know." Fearing Sonia might act rashly, Emma answered with a shaky tone that she was all right. Released, the maid tried again to explain that the altered Rosalie was not easy to manage. The butler swung the gate shut after the departure of the Crown Prince and Duchess. With a deft tug at the reins, Derivis brought the horse to a halt. The horse reared up on its hind legs, and neiging boisterously sent the sound echoing all around. Rosalie sternly demanded that Derivis dismount, and he hoped aloud she would soon master horseback riding. With clumsy effort and Derivis' assistance, the Duchess slid down, just as Sonia called their names. Suppressing her outrage, the young woman wrung her hands and inquired about their whereabouts. Derivis responded, "We just went for a brief stroll." Sonia, unconvinced by his reply, fixed her gaze on the retreating Crown Prince. Swiftly, the girl in yellow wheeled toward her companion. She clasped her hand as a child might and asked, "Will you bring me next time?" I felt utterly alone. As they strolled back to the house, Rosalie expressed regret and offered a tea time, an invitation her friend warmly received. The Duchess gave Emma instructions to serve them tea. Nervously, the servant kept an eye on them. She remained suspicious of Lady Sonia's sweet facade. Mo sensed that something was amiss. Rosalie moved through the grand hallways in her servant's attire, marveling at just how expansive this corridor appeared to be. Yet her reflections were cut short by her stepmother's outraged exclamation. Together with her attendant, she menacingly brandished a crimson fan, her attention fixed anxiously on Rosalie's deportment. Rosalie responded uneasily, "If there's something you need, you're welcome to go." Bella flared up and said, "Do you believe making a change will cause everything around you to alter too?" Turning on her heel, the Duchess abruptly confronted her, leaving Rosalie startled. In an even voice, Rosalie queried, "Does fear grip you?" Stunned, Bella hesitated, and Rosalie pressed her, wondering aloud if her disregard arose from fear. Springing swiftly toward the bewildered, flame-haired woman, the protagonist declared, "You tense like a trapped animal desperate for escape." Determined to reassert her dominance, Bella blurted out, "How dare you speak that way to me? Is it because the Crown Prince graces us with his presence?" She punctuated her warning, "Once the royal visitor goes, you will answer for this, Rosalie." Before she could finish, the Crown Prince materialized without warning, inquiring about her plans for the Duchess. Bella spun fearfully toward him as he repeated, "What exactly do you intend for the Duchess?" Still answered by silence. He lowered his tone and insisted, "I await your answer." Bewildered now, Bella stammered, "Oh, it's really nothing, it's just minor chores around the house." Fixing her with an unwavering stare, he pressed her to explain why he and Lady Sonia should be sent away over simply domestic affairs. The woman quivered, overcome with embarrassment. Taking control, Rosalie assured the prince, "Please don't be concerned, Your Highness, it's merely a trivial domestic issue." With a gentle grip on her stepmother's shoulder, the Duchess whispered a warning to mind her language from now on. She gently added, "With our visitors departing soon, we surely hope for a smooth occasion." Yet Bella remained shaking, stirred by frustration and helplessness. After the fiery-haired woman vanished stealthily, Despised confessed to Rosalie that he had been eager to assist her, but perhaps he ought not to have intervened. The Duchess wordlessly inquired whether his visit had been for her, and he explained, "Lady Sonia invited you for tea." Preparing to exit, Rosalie informed him that she would change her attire and soon return. Yet she hesitated, glancing back when Despised remarked, "That's a shame, your attire pleases me." His mention left a mark upon her. Not once before had someone appreciated her choice to dress in such grandeur. Assured, the Crown Prince was content, and Rosalie responded, "Truly? Then feel free to continue, we'll join you presently." Watching her depart, Despised quietly pondered whether Bella's remark had unsettled her. He observed that this appearance presented her in a new light. A while afterward, by the grand entrance, Rosalie, clad in her pink and white dress, bade farewell to the Crown Prince and her companion as the servants attended. By Despised' side stood Lady Sonia, who murmured, "Farewell, Rosalie, until next time." Smiling, the Crown Prince declared, "In 7 days, I shall see you again, Duchess." Sonia's eyes went wide with distress as she focused on Despised. Paralyzed with shock, Rosalie called softly, "Sonia?" The young lady shifted her demeanor at once, brightly saying, "Oh yes, until we meet at the celebration." Their two guests soon departed via carriage. Opposite Despised, Lady Sonia sat engrossed deep in thought. At length, she responded, "Devi, it seems you and Rosalie have drawn together rather quickly." The prince answered with little inflection, "Yes, indeed it was enjoyable." Yet Sonia felt unconvinced by his reply. She went on, mentioning her unease with her friend's sudden transformation in character, adding that Bella was wary of confronting her. Her words provoked a small smile from Despised. He calmly suggested he didn't perceive any need for concern. Abruptly, Sonia was gripped by an odd sort of emotion. She seized the folds of her dress, her hands twisting the fabric. Despised regarded her, suddenly intrigued. Steadying herself, she insisted, "It's of no consequence." Simultaneously, Rosalie, Aaron, and Gilbert, the smith of the village, were deliberating over the latest crossbow design. Gilbert observed, "This is a rather extraordinary sketch for a crossbow." Surveying the notes, he remarked, "Though the grip is crafted of wood, it operates like a pistol and is compact." And then, feeling out of depth, the smith confessed such a crossbow was quite outside his experience. The protagonist, drawing on the expertise gleaned from her previous existence, enlightened us on how the finest timber could elevate our craft. Turning her attention to Gilbert, she remarked that surely he must know the solution, to which he calmly answered that he would resolve it through sorcery. Not familiar with the workings of magic, the heroine presumed he intended to cast a spell upon the crossbow. Then the smith contributed further, suggesting that magical energies could be channeled through the ogre's tendons. He further explained this would enhance the power behind every shot and also make the crossbow weightless in hand. Pausing from her perusal of the plans, Rosalie inquired what was required to perform such extraordinary magic. Listing off several mystical ingredients, he warned that acquiring them would come at a great cost. The Duchess responded that she would investigate the matter, gestured sharply with her finger, and asked to take a look. Indicating a section of the schematic, she explained it would serve as a site and detailed its intended use. Gilbert assured her of his effort, even admitting this would be his initial experience with such a design. Rosalie continued, "So tell me, when you begin, What action will you take first? The craftsman proclaimed he would keep silent, bowed politely, and apologized as he excused himself. After Koval departed, Aaron, still troubled, asked, "Do you intend to establish an archer corps?" Reflecting on his own knights, he remarked that it sounded akin to forming artillery, since some among his ranks did not bear swords. Rosalie, gazing through the window, responded, "Then let us assign them to this new regiment." Aaron questioned who would assume the role of their instructor. Without hesitation, the Duchess looked to him and said, "That duty shall fall to me." A little while after, Rosalie sat in her office, absorbed in a recently arrived letter. It was sent by Countess Smoyer-on-Seth, who wrote that her arrival would be sooner than expected. She oversees the most prominent merchant guild throughout the empire, and Deriv is frequently allied with her following the mine acquisition. Another knock sounded at Rosalie's door, prompting her to respond, "Enter, please." Breathless, Emma came in bearing refreshments and tea for the Countess. As the attendant delicately poured tea into the china, Rosalie offered a word of gratitude. With a biscuit resting delicately between her fingers and holding the letter, the Duchess directed me to deliver it personally to Countess Smoyer-on-Seth. Anxiously, Emma attempted to persuade her lady against the errand. She began her story, explaining she had tended to this family over many years, and still found herself searching in vain for understanding. Rosalie, growing impatient, urged her, "Please, just say what you mean." Her words came slowly, almost hesitantly, yet just then Erudite entered the office, intent on bringing immediate resolution to pressing matters. Emery considered her timing, and, with a pleasant smile, said the issue at hand was more pressing and she would relate things later. Rosalie insisted she share whatever concerns were disturbing her peace with the staff. Emma responded, "Yes, thank you." In that instant, she vanished without a sound, as if she had never been there at all. Namas swiftly closed the door and breathed out deeply, as though a heavy burden had finally been lifted. Lady Sonia's actions left her bewildered. There was no doubt she was deeply involved in something secretive. So it crossed Emma's mind to inquire if she and Rosalie were destined to become widowed noblewomen. However, she quickly realized such a question would be taking it too far. Nevertheless, she understood that as long as her Duchess title remained, she would watch over Rosalie. Rosalie and Erudite faced a myriad of choices yet to be made. Their crucial discussion stopped short when a fuming Bella attempted to break into the study. After rather loudly scolding the butler, she burst through the door with forceful energy. In a frazzled voice, undeterred by Erudite's presence, she blurted, "Who dared meddle with my allowance?" Rosalie let out an exasperated breath, prompting Bella to snap, "Idiot! You were informed of this long before." With emboldened intensity, she demanded if her stepdaughter planned to attend the celebration in lavish attire. Slashing, she further vocalized her outrage, "You are such a miserable coward." Rosalie stood and declared Bella's own dishonesty could fill a chest with fine jewels. Ruby locks aflame, Bella appeared truly startled to have her stepdaughter speak to her so. The Duchess continued, pointing out that money could be raised by selling her sumptuous gowns if needed. Rising from her seat, she armed herself, uttering cautionary words. Seizing Bella's wrist, she informed her that should she storm and spouting such foolishness again, it might cost her dearly. The experience filled Bella with absolute terror. Rosalie, composed and unwavering, locked eyes with Bella and pressed her blade against her skin. A crimson bead slid down Bella's shaking hand, and she realized that perhaps Rosalie had indeed lost her mind. The Duchess then turned her attention toward Bella, her attendant, who cowered in fear behind the door. With a voice quivering from fright, the young woman stammered, "Whitus, yes." With a swift gesture, Rosalie removed the blade from Bella's wrist, then instructed her to put it away. Bella was at a loss, fully realizing her stepdaughter had assumed command. Thankfully, the maid attended to her. Erudite silently observed the entire encounter. Once the flame-haired lady and her servant exited, Erudite commented that he now saw where tales of the fiendish Duchess originated. Adjusting his spectacles, he remarked, "Your reputation precedes you. If this is troubling, perhaps you might address it." Noticing Bella was childless, he proposed simply providing her with funds and sending her on her way. Crossing her arms and averting her face, she gave a curt "no," much to Erudite's surprise. Yet soon after, she added the comment, "Not at this time." Rosalie and her servant wended through streets overflowing with bustling crowds. Toronto and another mounted knight sought training within the capital. Rosalie, bound there herself, instead directed them toward the estate. Approaching with decorum, the butler informed her, "Butler Martin is presently waiting for you at the manor." Rosalie asked Erudite to oversee the estate while she was gone, which he did with admirable courage. After assigning everyone their tasks, the Duchess concluded, "Very well, let us proceed." Traveling by carriage, Rosalie and Emma approached an immense estate, soon to pass through a shimmering portal. With curiosity, Rosalie gazed out the window, absorbed in the journey ahead. Emma cautioned her that stepping into the portal would render Rosalie momentarily blind. Rosalie responded that it had been ages since she experienced that. Soon, the carriage's wooden wheels grazed the portal's gleaming surface. Rosalie kept her gaze trained on it, as the carriage seemed to gather even more speed. At last, they found themselves entirely engulfed within a dazzlingly radiant portal. The transportation unfolded more swiftly than Rosalie could have imagined. Once more they touched the earth, nearing their journey's end. The Duchess admitted there was little excitement. Upon stepping out of the carriage, a gracious welcome by servants and a butler awaited them at the Duchess manor in the city. Butler Martin led Rosalie and her maid toward the heart of the mansion. Marveling at the magnificent, gleaming edifice from within, Rosalie mused at its loveliness. Rosalie draped off her cloak within those hallowed halls. She instructed Emma to fetch her a dress of comfort for her to wear. Moments later, the Duchess strode down the manor's corridor clad in boots, breeches, and an azure blouse. A woman intercepted Rosalie, questioning whether she was venturing out alone. Assigned to escort the Duchess through town, the woman's face was etched with anxiety for her charge. With her fingers grazing the dagger at her hip, Rosalie reassured her not to fret. Then Aaron approached with honest warmth, affirming the Duchess could manage any challenge herself. Anxiously, the woman said, "Please return safely and swiftly." Garbed in a sable cowl, Rosalie slipped unseen amid the bustling city throngs. Rosalie mused with a gentle grin, "What a good place this is, with little ones playing everywhere." Suddenly, an unsettling voice carried through the air, "Nearer by, let's go." When Rosalie's gaze shifted, she saw a weeping child struggling against the strong, round grasp of a grown man. Aware that the streets held dangers like child kidnappings, Rosalie dashed forward to intervene. With sudden swiftness, she wrenched the boy free from hands enclosing him like thorny brambles. Rallying the child to her side, Rosalie calmed his tears, but confusion lingered in his wide eyes. Striding boldly onward, the heroine launched into motion, graceful and sure. Questioning, the abductor mumbled in embarrassment, "Who are you?" No answer given, she pressed her blade gently to the man's throat. This gesture utterly surprised the would-dad. "Be kidnapper." Rosalie instructed him to retreat, and terror overtook him. Any pretense of bravado vanished. With an icy edge in her voice, she demanded, "Explain your purpose with this boy at once, or else." Terrified, the man stammered that his intent was to deliver the boy to a certain residence in exchange for a lofty sum. Rosalie gently instructed the boy to summon the guards, and he gave a silent nod in affirmation. The young man with russet hair sped off, seeking out the Oz or on guard members. The Duchess still gripped the dagger she had pressed against the man, her eyes following as he faded into the distance. Firmly, she commanded her husband to bring her to their intended destination. The man led Rosalie through winding lanes until they reached an empty alley where not a soul stirred. Hands trembling, he carefully pushed open the door to a dim chamber, instantly greeted by rough voices growling, "Where did you put the children?" But before the entry swung wide, Rosalie struck, plunging her knife squarely between his shoulder blades. The startled men inside demanded her identity, as a drop of blood from their comrade grazed her cheek. Without hesitation, she felled another with a swift swing of her kinjal. Realizing her authority, the entire group banded together, bracing to bring her down. Just then, a muffled noise broke from a corner, faintly resembling someone speaking. All at once, the Duchess caught a familiar voice. "Duchess, whatever brings you here?" Rosalie spun round abruptly. The speaker's tone struck a bell in her memory. She replied, "Your Highness, what has brought you here?" The Crown Prince sat bound by thick ropes upon a chair. Looking away with a playful gleam, the Crown Prince quipped, "Just killing time?" Rosalie wondered if he had taken leave of his senses. Summoning a surge of energy, the prince broke free and declared the moment ripe to end things. Panic overtook the men. They could only guess at his true identity. Deriviz, sword drawn, declared heroically that to challenge the royal heir was to sign one's doom. He and the Duchess quickly determined their tactics, choreographing their assault from either side. For the villains caught within, this fight was hopeless. Before such a pair, defeat was assured. After the dreadful clash, the Duchess and Crown Prince recounted the events to the capital's knights, leaving them astounded. Rosalind backed up the account, evidence of battle still etched in the bruises adorning their faces. One of the armored men inquired, "Pardon, might I know who you are?" The Duchess let out a sophist. She responded, "Does that truly matter?" Deriviz remained silent, lost in admiration of her words. Linking her grimy hands atop the scattered documents, she continued, "I am a noblewoman, surely that's sufficient for you." She also remembered Deriviz, whom she held to be her trusted knight, and inquired if there were other duties that knights might perform. The heroine clearly understood that the heir to the throne preferred to conceal his identity, as exposure could make matters even more tangled. The armored man persistently questioned him about who he truly was, but in that moment, a dagger flashed dangerously close to his cheek. Ginjal had been sent swiftly into the assailant's shoulder, halting the attacker's momentum. Rosalie, her tone sharp, queried if he was still curious about who she might be. The knights then chose not to pursue them further, hastening away toward another path. At that, the Duchess recommended to Deriviz that it was time to depart. Advanced a pace and intoned, "We should leave now." After a slight pause, the observant crown prince simply murmured, "Understood." Along their route, he questioned how she had uncovered his desire to mask his real self. Maig responded with calm observation, to which Deriviz extolled her skill with daggers. Shifting the conversation, she declared, "I'm heading home. My attire is in an unseemly state." Once again he lauded her talent, offering his fine silk kerchief, but she declined it with a chilly formality, which puzzled Deriviz, considering the kind deed she had rendered. Soon after, the girl fixed her gaze on him and said she would make use of it if he allowed. Cholaike suggested she address him casually by name, but Rosalind refused, saying such informality would be improper. She resumed her training. As she observed the soldiers sparring, she remarked upon their noticeable improvement. She even pondered increasing the rigor of their exercises, believing they found it scarcely challenging. Yet, truthfully, the troops were nearly spent, longing for an interval of rest. Without warning, a messenger approached the Duchess and announced the arrival of a visitor. It happened to be Deriviz. She regarded him with surprise. How had he ascertained her daily agenda? "The butler must be the source," the attendant explained. The young woman cast a pointed glance at the butler, but before matters escalated, Deriviz stepped forward and extended an invitation to accompany him. The young woman stood frozen in place, speechless, her gaze locked wordlessly with his own. Breaking the tense silence, the man stepped closer and murmured softly that it had been in jest, though he implied he'd bring it up once more in the days to come. At the outset, Rosalind was rigid and kept quiet. Soon after, however, she shouted for the servant to fetch her a coat. Together, they set off toward the bustling market. A lively card game soon caught the young lady's interest, and she expressed a desire to take part. The merchant welcomed this. He was deceiving his patrons and had no plan to let them be victorious. Deriviz figured the game would bring some amusement. Spotting the fine cut of Deriviz's attire, the card dealer rejoiced inwardly, expecting generous winnings that day. Rosalind leaned close and cautioned him that joining the game would not wise. Nonetheless, the gentleman boldly poured out a mound of gold coins atop the table. The merchant proposed they select their preferred level of challenge. Deriviz opted for one that matched his sizable wager. The dealer invited them to pick a card. Deriviz clasped Rosalind's hand, inviting her to join in the wager with him. As a forfeit, the one who lost would have to grant the other's desire. Rosalind pondered this for a moment, but then, her reservations vanished, and she confidently took her seat at the table. With nimble fingers, the merchant shuffled the cards and launched the contest. Deriviz made his selection. Rosalind drew her own card next. Ultimately, fortune favored Deriviz, making him the winner. Amid the commotion, the merchant attempted to flee to avoid surrendering the gold, but Rosalind quickly stopped him, insisting they receive their rightful prize. Backed into a corner, the merchant had no alternative but to surrender all the coins to her. The two friends resolved to enjoy their good fortune at the festive fair. They sought out the archery range, and they would pass the hours recklessly swapping cards. Yet, whatever the game, Rosalind could never seem to win. Because of this, Deriviz never missed a chance to tease her relentlessly. In his imagination, the Duchess was something of a daring risk-taker when she played. Out of nowhere, he realized how much laughter and enjoyment the girl had brought into his days lately. They meandered among the stalls until twilight crept in. As a result, Rosalind pressed her aching leg, pain flickering sharply through her. Yes searched the crowd for a shop selling shoes. All at once, Deriviz swept Rosalind up in his arms. Ignoring her protests put her down, but her spouse merely insisted he would carry her, as her steps brought her discomfort. Seat-open flushed with embarrassment beneath endless watching eyes, who set her gently on a bench, asking her to wait a while. Darted off, disappearing swiftly down a side street. Moments later he was back, holding a pair of shoes with soft soles and pleasant fit. Attentive, he helped slip them onto her feet, assuring her she could wander endless streets by his side. The girl murmured, "It seems you are a kinder soul than I believed." Grateful for the compliment, the man gently proposed they browse for an even finer pair together, but she caught his hand resolutely, declaring these shoes were just what she needed. Watching her act so sure of herself left Deriviz genuinely bewildered. It was Rosalind who suggested they continue, exploring the market's remains. Deriviz wondered if perhaps next time they should bring Sonia along. Rosalind quietly told him she found his company sufficient. Of course, Sonia was dear, but her presence might dull the day. Rosalind recalled that in the story her husband would come to care for Sonia, but her thoughts were carried to matters of war and land. High dusk. Whispers fluttered all over the estate Rosalie and the crown prince were reportedly seen together. Yet, when she entered the palace, all present swiftly raised their hands to their lips, stifling any remark so as not to let her overhear them. Upon her entrance into the grand hall, none could recognize her, so profoundly had time and change altered her visage. Soon after, the crown prince made his arrival. Fate had them cross paths in the heart of the hall. He recalled her elegance yesterday, yet today she had transformed and appeared even more radiant. Abruptly, Sonia hurried toward them and said, "Did you leave with Rosalind? That does trouble me a bit." The music began at that instant. Teraviz gently reminded Rosalind of the wager Hed triumphed in the night before. Sensing she had been left unnoticed, Sonia spun on her heel and departed. Meanwhile, the crown prince politely asked Rosalind to join him in a dance. She, however, requested he devise another diversion besides a dance together. He replied that another occasion might see them waltz. Rosalind simply responded that an engagement with another awaited her. Teraviz, distressed, inquired, "Are you seeing your beloved?" Yet, Rosalind answered with composure that there was no such romantic attachment for her. As she neared the doorway, a voice called her name from behind. It belonged to Bianca Bright, the second daughter of Marquis Bright. Bianca observed that Rosalie appeared quite familiar with the crown prince, yet Rosalind assured her that perception was misleading. Prompted by envy, Bianca sought to spill a goblet of wine across Rosalind's attire. She aimed, hurling it squarely in the direction of Rosalind's gown. Nevertheless, Rosalind reacted, instantly deftly intercepting the would-be mishap. Looking intently into Bianca's eyes, Rosalind advised that she hone her abilities further. Bianca's face flushed with the fires of indignation and mortification. Upon witnessing her, Rosalind mused that Bianca perfectly resembled an antagonist whose heart ached for Teraviz. Within the story, Bianca had conspired to have Sonia abducted, though it was the crown prince who ultimately became her rescuer. At a distance from the crowd, Countess Moiranseth quietly observed it all, noting the intrigue reflected in Rosalind's eyes. As she wandered through the park that bordered the estate, Rosalind was struck by the serenity and hush enveloping the scene. Without warning, 8 thieves emerged around her, encircling her on the path. Rosalind teased, "Are these masks some kind of fancy face ornaments?" All the while, she was quietly slipping off her footwear. In a flash, she hurled a shoe right into the face of one of the thieves. Just as she suspected, their resolve crumbled easily. The girl mused. A dagger might have suited better, yet her sword sufficed. With a swift flick of her arm, she sliced through one bandit's throat. She sent another sword flying with a deft blow, launching it so high it soared skyward, and nearly shattered the skull of yet another opponent. Grasping her necklace, she used it as a shield against attacks. Suddenly, someone grabbed her from behind, cutting off her breath. Her vision faded, but before succumbing, she succeeded in taking 3 assailants down with her. The thieves seized Rosalind, binding her tightly. One thought consumed the girl: why herself and not Sonia? Perhaps rumor spoke too freely of her and Teraviz. If so, then events had drifted from their prescribed course. To escape, she must find a way to loosen the bonds. From somewhere close, she could hear footsteps of a robber nearing. When proximity allowed, she delivered a swift kick straight to his head. Cries of alarm, some and more people in haste. They burst in only to witness Rosalind standing free from her ties. Then, one of the thieves grabbed Bianca, pressing a blade to her throat, and threatened that if Rosalind acted, he would end her. Bianca wailed, claiming he was under her employ and had no right to scare her so. Meanwhile, word of Rosalind's absence reached the palace. Dervis grew frantic with worry. Everyone raced out to find her. Sonia stumbled upon her necklace and shoes amidst felled robbers. When the crown prince was confronted with this, he demanded a thorough search of the entire estate instantly. Teraviz sought Nathan's assistance at once. He gave the command to locate and eliminate everyone, sparing only the girl with the snowy hair. To him, it posed no challenge at all. In an instant, he tracked down both Rosalind and Bianca. The directive specified sparing Rosalind alone, so though he shifted his intent towards Bianca, Rosalind defensively shielded her. Within the story, this man was tasked by the crown prince to rescue Sonia, yet the original plot involved no command targeting Bianca. Yet Rosalind could not allow such a fate, for that would incite the Marquis of Bright to probe deeper. Such interference could well ignite conflict. Rosalind urgently needed a clever solution. Abruptly, she recalled his fondness for confections. She proposed that if Bianca were spared, he could indulge in endless sweets to his heart's content. Rosalind further vowed to speak with Teraviz, ensuring that Nathan would not incur his wrath for diverging from the order. Upon hearing this, Nathan acquiesced without protest. Yet before anything else, he needed to return Rosalind safely. Meanwhile, Bianca's tears fell unchecked. Rosalind approached her to gently restore her composure. She reassured her that the blame did not fall at her feet, but warned that if this came to light, repercussions would follow, so silence would be safest. That said, Rosalind returned to the estate. There, Despised was already lying in wait, brandishing his sword. His first words concerned the fate of those who had assaulted him, ready to enact retribution then and there before Rosalind's eyes. Nathan affirmed he stood prepared to carry out whatever orders were handed down, but Rosalind intervened before the crown prince could act. She strode towards him, calmly declaring that she was not one to perish so easily. Despised' relief was evident when the young woman returned unharmed. Rosalind requested that he let the incident go. Daryl could not fathom how she maintained such composure over it. Yet Rosalind assured him she possessed a wiser method for dealing with the dilemma. Then, he requested that I clarify it for him. Yet the young woman remarked that the hour was late, she needed to leave, and she promised she'd explain everything that had taken place sometime soon. At that point, the gentleman volunteered to escort her back to her home. Upon the prince's return, the crown prince was brimming with questions about the recent events. A fervent determination burned within him to capture and punish any who had shown disrespect towards the Duchess. However, he must now reconcile himself with the situation. By the following morning, word of the incident had reached the press and appeared in the newspapers. Later that afternoon, Countess Seth made her way to the manor. Having seen the article herself, she was clearly anxious for Rosaline's well-being. Nevertheless, Rosaline assured her that all was well and expressed gratitude for the Countess's concern. The Countess expressed her pleasure at the visit and inquired about what Rosalind hoped to purchase from her. Rosalind explained she sought to buy a large quantity of enchanted scrolls for use with organ tendons. The Countess promptly figured out that these items would serve in the creation of weapons. Nibbling worriedly on her fan, she remarked that it would prove rather challenging given the current high demand. To this, Rosalind declared she wished to arrange for delivery to occur over the following 3 years. Furthermore, she added, the authorities would even lower the duty for this particular shipment. For the Duchess, these scrolls represented her principal source of earnings, thus the proposal seemed all the more lucrative. Rosalind, in addition, insisted that their business arrangement remain concealed from others. After some contemplation, the Duchess of Sed accepted the condition and promised to send over the contract at the earliest opportunity. Rosalind found herself taken aback that Seth had agreed so readily. She responded that an offer so advantageous simply could not be turned down. Later in the day, Rosalind encountered Sonia, who was deeply worried about her state. Yet Rosalind reassured her that everything was all right and that there was no need for alarm. Taking her companion's hand, Sonia said, "Word is you've chosen not to attend the ball tonight, and your decision is wise, since meeting Darian again would be misguided." Rosalind quickly withdrew her hand and insisted that Sonia was mistaken. Recognizing that her scheme failed, Sonia suddenly recalled pressing matters elsewhere and excused herself. Thus, Rosalind was left standing, gazing after her departing figure. Sometime afterward, she returned to her duties, only to be disturbed once more and notified of another visitor awaiting her presence. Rosalind found herself taken aback by Bianca's unexpected call. Had she arrived, perhaps, to create a scene? Rosalind instructed that tea should not be brought out, a curious breach of custom with a guest in attendance. They encountered one another in the entryway, where Rosalind inquired as to the purpose of her visit. With a trace of timidity, Bianca admitted she had come to express contrition. It appeared Rosalind's deeds had moved her, for she earnestly pleaded for permission to address Rosalind as her elder sister. Such an appeal left Rosalind perplexed. Curiously, she questioned why Bianca wished to use this form of address. Bianca admitted her astonishment that Rosalind had acted to save her life, though Bianca herself had threatened hers. Rosalind answered that her guest was welcome to refer to her however she pleased, and Bianca's gaze brightened at that. Bianca then told Rosalind that, should she desire it, she would be welcome to visit Bianca Essel on another occasion. The young woman considered this invitation thoughtfully. That era was fraught with displays of opulence, and sensitive conversations swirled around appearances, making life especially challenging for Sonia. Without warning, Bianca interrupted Rosalind's quiet speculation to ask if the whispered gossip of her closeness with Despised held any truth to that. Rosalind answered only with silence. Rosalind followed Naiden through the narrow streets of the bustling city. The place where he lived was a quiet, inconspicuous, old and remote house. Naiden had good hearing, and so the noise from a large crowd of people bothered him. Then he threw the Knights of Rosalind, who still hadn't recovered, to the ground. The man lit a candle, and the room noticeably brightened. He asked the Duchess what business she had. Rosalind sat on the couch against the wall and said she wanted a definite answer that he would do it first. Naiden fell down next to the Duchess and made a last attempt to find out what needed to be done. Having received no answer, he agreed. Rosalie didn't expect him to agree so quickly. When she asked the reason for this, Naiden admitted that he had a very strong interest in her. Rosalie's face remained expressionless, but she was surprised by his answer. Naiden recalled his words about how he is very good at any action. The Duchess began to explain the mission. It concerned the old Duchess, Bella Judith. Naiden was supposed to get close to her and report back to Rosalie about her actions. And in order for her to tell him everything, he needs to make it so that he can influence her actions. Naiden replied that it was a piece of cake for him. He would carry out her assignment to the best of his ability. For this, Rosalie promised to pay him a huge sum as gratitude. The girl rose from the sofa and stood over her knights. She kicked them and asked how long they planned to lie there. One of them mumbled that he heard the devil's voice. Then Rosalie said that if they didn't get up right now, they would regret it. Realizing that the Duchess was truly above them, the knights quickly jumped up from the ground. They asked Rosalie where they were and what the man who knocked them out was doing there. The boys started accusing him of kidnapping, but she calmed them down. The knights were perplexed when Rosalie ordered them to stop talking nonsense and follow her. After making sure that the Duchess was not hurt, they followed her back to the castle. It was late in the evening. When Rosalie was getting ready for bed, she found a letter from Bianca. On paper, the girl described how she had a fun day and that she already missed her knee. The letter was loud and picky, just like the author herself. Rosalie put the papers down and fell onto the bed. She had a lot to think about. It wasn't even a few seconds later that someone knocked on her window. It was odd, considering her room was quite high up. Rosalie got out of bed and took a dagger from the nightstand. The sound came from the balcony. The Duchess already guessed who it was and so confidently opened the doors. There, a night visitor was already waiting for her. Duchess asked if she had opened the door too easily. After all, some intruder could have knocked on the door just as politely. But then he caught sight of Rosalie and fell silent. The girl was wearing a white nightgown, and the upper part of her chest was translucent. Duchess looked away, embarrassed. He advised her to be careful with those who came to her unannounced at night. Rosalie invited him into the room and put on a white robe so as not to embarrass the prince. He apologized for coming without an official visit. The girl gave him a cold compliment about it. The Duchess thanked him for fulfilling her request and promised to reimburse him later, but the prince countered that it would be better if she told him what she was working on instead. Rosalie asked why he cared at all, but the prince explained that he would. The girl assumed that she was worried about Sonia and what would happen to her, so we need to make sure he doesn't interfere in her affairs. Then, no one will get hurt. She asked him to promise that the prince would not interfere with her in her business. Duchess had no choice but to agree to her condition. Rosalie revealed that the Marquis of Wendell was planning a territorial war, and she wanted it to begin. Duchess was very surprised by this news. The Duchess explained that because of the rumors about Rosalie and the prince, the Marquis might become frightened. This would complicate her preparations for a territorial war. Therefore, she asked him not to interfere. The girl said that she would soon go back to her estate. The prince wanted to know the exact date, but Rosalie remained silent. He then called her reckless, but the Duchess had often heard such things. In any case, His Majesty now has no further dealings with her. Now they were playing a staring contest. Duchess looked at the Duchess with a mesmerized gaze. Rosalie didn't give up either, and looked back without emotion. It was true. They had nothing in common anymore. Rosalie was the first to break the silence. The girl wished the prince a safe journey home, to which he smiled mysteriously. He turned and headed toward the balcony, the moon illuminating his silhouette in the night. He looked at Rosalie again and said, "We'll see," and left as quietly as he had come. After that night's meeting, Rosalie went to bed peacefully, and in the morning a new day began. Bianca came to visit her during the day. She was very happy to see her sister. Rosalie said the girl could have simply sent a servant, but she wanted to visit the Duchess, and she also said that if she needed more sweets, she could always ask her. Bianca suggested going shopping together next time, but Rosalie replied that she would soon be going home, so Bianca decided not to waste time and go shopping today. A few minutes later, they were already standing near the dressing room. Bianca was absolutely delighted with all the dresses and suits. She showed and tried on all the options. Meanwhile, Rosalie did not radiate such zeal and simply praised her friend's taste. While Bianca was choosing a new dress to try on, the Duchess's gaze fell on an olive scarf. It could be tied beautifully around the neck as an accessory. Bianca noticed her friend's interest, and so I immediately decided to present it to her as a gift. A couple of minutes later, the girl was already showing Rosalie in the new yellow dress again. Almost every outfit in the wardrobe department suited her, and she was very happy about it. Seeing her so cheerful, Rosalie couldn't believe that she was the main villain of the novel. But then one of the servants accidentally hit the girl with her shoulder, which made her very angry. The maid began to apologize for her misdeed, but Bianca no longer paid attention. She scolded the girl for her clumsiness and inattention. She was angry and irritated. Now Bianca really did look like the main villain of a book novel. Noticing the lady's bad mood, another maid wanted to know what had happened. She was worried and walked quickly towards her mistress, but on the way she hit one of the sculptures, which quickly began to fall on Bianca, and she would have crushed her if not for Rosalie. The Duchess stood between the statue and the girl and held the sculpture with her hand. Everything worked out, and she advised the servants to move it even closer to the wall. And that's what they did. Bianca, of course, was outraged by this and was going to scold them, but Rosalie stopped her. She said they had already apologized, so there was no point in getting angry anymore. Bianca's mood changed in a second. She brightened up and said, "Let it be so, so says the Duchess." At that moment, someone called the girls, and they both knew who it was. Sophia stood in the doorway, wearing her usual yellow dress. Her eyes, as usual, shone bright green. Noticing her tone and manner, Bianca reminded her that she had not given her permission to address her by her first name. Rosalie noticed the tension in the room and asked her friend to stop. Bianca did not resist and fell silent, although I was a little offended by the Duchess. After exchanging a few sharp words with her, Sophia Amin suggested that Rosalie talk in private. She didn't mind, and the two of them went into a spare room not far from the wardrobe, where Bianca remained bored. Sophia began the conversation by reminding them of her strained relationship with bright Bianca. She asked the Duchess how she could be friends with her knowing this. Rosalie replied that it was all because of that incident at the dance. She wanted to add something else, but Lady Emian interrupted her. She was angry that she knew nothing about that evening. No matter how many times Sophia questioned Dervis, he wouldn't answer. She was angry that they were hiding something from her that hadn't happened before. Rosalie promised that if she waited, she would explain everything. She would also make sure Bianca apologized for her behavior. But Sophia didn't listen. She looked into her eyes and asked how Rosalie could do what she couldn't. Meanwhile, the Duchess did not understand what exactly Miss Amins was talking about. Sophia looked at her seriously, and in a cold tone practically ordered her not to communicate with Bianca. She wanted Rosalie to simply listen to her advice, as usual. But she forgot that the Duchess had changed. Rosalie made it clear that she had no reason to obey her orders. This rebellion enraged Sophia, and she, clenching her teeth in anger and saying nothing, left. Meanwhile, Bianca, who had been waiting for her friend in the hallway, peeked out from behind the door. She was worried about Rosalie, but Rosalie reassured her that she was okay. She was already a little tired and suggested finishing up the shopping for the day. Bianca didn't mind. Evening had fallen, the sun was setting. Lady Bright was still delighted with her meeting with the Duchess, but suddenly, among the crowd, she noticed Sophia, who was making her way through the people. Remembered Rosalie promising that she would ask Amins for forgiveness for her behavior, so she decided to act now and called Sophia to her. Lady Amins did not expect to meet Bianca, and was not very happy about it. Meanwhile, Lady Bright was not happy about this either, but she tried not to show it and behaved proudly. She promised not to be rude to Sophia anymore, as she no longer wanted to see her sister Rosalie burdened. That's why she apologized for everything that had happened between them up until that moment. Amins countered that Bianca had pushed her away when she was being friendly. Lady Bright explained that she simply didn't like the fact that she was pretending to be kind, and she was also repelled by the fact that she enjoyed being on top. Sophia couldn't believe her ears. She became angry and began denying Bright's words. Bianca explained that Amins always boasted that she could control Rosalie and Dervis, but Sophia did not admit anything and denied all her words, sincerely did not understand what she was talking about. Now Lady Bright realized that she herself did not even notice it. She pretended it wasn't so, but she always stuck her nose up in the air, saying she was giving advice to the Duchess. This is one of the reasons why Lady Bright despised her, and she didn't care about her pretense, but she no longer dared to speak about the Duchess so unceremoniously. But Sophia didn't believe what she was saying until the very end. She truly didn't remember anything like that. She didn't do it, and her inner voice said so too. Somewhere deep inside, her dark personality convinced Amins that she was just helping. Now she perceived it as betrayal. She felt abandoned. The next day, the maid Emma asked Rosalie to go for a walk. The Duchess had been working in the office for 5 days, so it was unusual. She gave that scarf from the wardrobe to Emma as a gift for her favorite maid. She was very happy with such a gift. Suddenly, she heard a female voice behind her. Bella noticed that after the ball, the Duchess did not go out anywhere else. She accused her of making up rumors about the Crown Prince. but Rosalind asked coldly if it really mattered that much to her. The former Duchess did not expect such an answer. She replied that it couldn't be important to her. With this in mind, Rosalind asked her to just go and not bother her. An indignant Bella wanted to object, but she was stopped. Her lover was next to her and suggested that she simply leave. It was only thanks to him that Bella passed by without causing a scandal. She walked past Rosalind, followed by Naiden, who had carefully camouflaged himself. Now he had a white shirt and blonde hair. He was simply unrecognizable. She whispered to him to come to her that night for a new report. He nodded quietly and followed Bella, who was so outraged that she didn't notice anything around her. Late that evening, Rosalind checked her email. There was no news from Sonia. I wondered if she was like that from the start or if something influenced her. Meanwhile, the butler came and said that he had packed his things to return to the estate. Even if they forgot something, they can always use the portal. Rosalind thanked him for his hard work and sent him to his room to rest. The butler quietly left the room and closed the door behind him. Then Rosalind heard sounds from the balcony, opened the doors there, and confidently looked out. Their Naiden was already waiting for her in the moonlight, the glow of the stars and the cool of the night. The Duchess noticed that his hair was red and long again, as before his mission, but Naiden explained that all he needed was a little magic to completely change his appearance. Rosalind handed him a pendant that would open a portal to the ducal castle. She didn't give him the pendant in the first place because she was testing him, but this did not spoil Naiden's mood at all, and he continued to listen attentively. Rosalind explained that he had to report on Bella's activities every 4 days. Money and sweets will be paid after each report, but Naiden lifted her chin with his hand and asked her to praise him in any way he wanted. But Rosalind wasn't at all embarrassed and asked him to take his hands off in a nice way, but Naiden kept asking her to do it. Then she finally gave in and said that if it wasn't too much, she would do it. The boy was very happy to hear this. Then he firmly took Rosalind's hand in his. Naiden said, "See you in 4 days," and then gently kissed her porcelain hand. In the morning, Rosalind arrived back at the ducal estate full of enthusiasm. The day was warm and sunny, so everyone was in a good mood. Servants greeted her in the courtyard. Among them were the butler and her administrator, Ir, who were the first to approach her. Rosalind was glad that nothing criminal had happened in her absence. Well, she wasn't exactly relaxing in the capital anyway. Immediately upon her arrival, she invited Ir into her office. She was very pleased with the way he worked on the documents. Thanks to him, she didn't have to worry about what was happening in the estate. But Ir said that raising the knights' salaries and rebuilding the estate required enormous expenses. The percentage of income is too low, so he advised paying attention to it. But in response to this, Rosalind explained that she planned to sell the Dick mine. This year, there won't be as many life stones in it, so he needs to sell while everyone thinks he has a huge reserve. The Misha Empire's technology for measuring the amount of life stones is not accurate enough. Now, she knew why she had miscalculated the mine's deposits while reading this novel. Ir said that rumors might spread that the duchy was about to fall apart, but Rosalind explained that these were exactly the rumors she wanted. She knew that upon hearing these rumors, the Marquis of Wendell would take her bait. Ir added that this was only a temporary breakthrough, so it was worth coming up with a new plan. Then Rosalind thanked him for his advice and let him go. As he left the office, Ir noticed something strange that was bothering him. Even though the consequences of this choice would fall on the Duchess's shoulders, he was worried. With these thoughts, Ir walked out into the street. As he passed, he heard whispers. There was a group of servants standing next to him, who always talked everyone down. People were discussing the fact that he was an ordinary commoner and not an aristocrat like all the important people like him. They said he was just a lucky guy who succeeded in his position. It was even suggested that he was like a concubine for the Duchess. Ir was used to this kind of treatment. People said the same things about him all the time, but then something changed. He heard someone next to him ask why he tolerated this. Rosalind walked in front of him an instant and walked confidently towards the gossips. She stood right in front of them and ordered them to repeat their words, or she'll start breaking their fingers to make them talk. The group of people who had been discussing Ir a second ago were now on their knees, but Rosalind said they shouldn't apologize to her. Having understood the hint, the people crawled up to Ir and began to ask for forgiveness and mercy. Not expecting such a turn of events, the guy didn't know what to say. At that moment, the butler approached them to find out what had happened. Rosalind ordered him to fire these servants without any severance pay, and she also asked him to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Then, she took Ir by the sleeve of his shirt and dragged him into the castle. The guy was too surprised by what happened to resist. When they were already walking down the corridor, he asked how long she was going to lead him like this. Rosalind replied that she thought he didn't seem very happy to be there. When she let go of his hand, He admitted that she was more caring than he thought. Ird had asked why she was so kind to him if he was an ordinary commoner, but Rosalind asked in return whether it really mattered in their case. After all, she needs him. He's her man, so naturally, she should take care of him. Ird was touched by such kind words. Hearing them from Rosalind was especially pleasant. Noticing this, Rosalind put her hand on his shoulder and said that he looked much better now, and she asked that if something like that happened, he should tell her right away. Once she was sure that he was okay, she could go about her business with a clear conscience. Serdiet watched her go in amazement. The feeling that had stirred him then returned to him. It was because he cared about her. Ird wanted with all his heart for her choice to be the right one. And he wouldn't fail like the Duchess. That's why he wanted to do it right. To arrange everything so that she will not need anything after she returns to the duchy after the victory, so that the path she chooses is the right one, and he could help her with that. This act inspired Ird to work for the good of the Duchess and to always be faithful to her. Now he will help her in the government even more and become the best advisor for her. That same day, Rosalind arranged a meeting with Commander Emian's chief Farron. Tomorrow before lunch after training they will go to look at the crossbow. Only those connected to this weapon should know about it. That is, the Duchess, Aaron, and the Master. At the time they had agreed, Rosalind had just reached her room, where she said goodbye to the knight. When she walked inside, she saw Emma, who was cleaning. The maid promised to finish soon, but the Duchess did not rush her. It was at this moment that Emma found some strange items for a woman's wardrobe. She handed the Duchess a beautiful blue jacket and simple lilac slippers. Rosalind's mind flashed back to the ball when Dervis had given her these things. Slippers when her feet hurt from the heels and a jacket when it got cold outside. The shoes were too unpresentable, and there would be no suitable clothes to go with them. But Rosalind still asked not to throw anything away. Apparently, they had some value to her after all. Emma didn't quite understand why, but she obeyed her mistress and hung the jacket in the dressing room. After a while, there was a knock on the door. It was the butler, Duran. He was a little worried, so Rosalind asked what was wrong. The butler explained that the county stat had urgently sent a man to them. After some time, they were already sitting in the Duchess's office. As it turned out, the messenger brought her a letter without any special instructions. Rosalind didn't know who it was from. She took her dagger and carefully removed the seal. Having unfolded the letter, the Duchess began to read the text carefully. Judging by her displeased reaction, there was nothing good written there. Noticing this, Duran asked if they had any serious problems. Rosalind explained that nothing serious was happening right now, but they had to stay on guard. Having said this, the Duchess took out matches and carefully set fire to the sheet of paper with the message. Now is the time when bandits can gather at the fork in the road, the only road used to transport supplies, under the Emperor's jurisdiction. They need to gain access to the knight's movements while hiding their abilities before the war begins. Duran asked the Duchess if she was all right. Rosalind replied that even if she wasn't, she still had to move. She needs to go to the capital for a while, but without a carriage. No one must know of her absence. Rosalind wore a dark green robe over her training uniform to avoid recognition. That same evening, she was already walking through a secret passage near the walls of the imperial castle in the capital. Looking at the fact that there are no people here, this is the very loophole in their yard that was mentioned in the novel. An ideal place for Dervis to slip in and out of the imperial palace without being noticed. Rosalind hid near the stone wall and began to wait for the prince to appear. When night had already fallen on the capital, she heard a noise above her. Dervis was just jumping over the high fence when he noticed his guest. He was a little confused and almost fell, because no one knew about this passage. The prince jumped carefully and landed next to the Duchess. Standing up, he asked her what she was doing there. Rosalind responded logically that she was waiting for him. Dervis saw her sitting on the cold ground and advised her to get up. His silhouette was illuminated by the moon, his hair blending with the dark sky. He extended his hand to her, but there was one problem. Rosalind's legs were numb from being immobilized for so long. She had been sitting there for long enough, and now she simply couldn't get to her feet. Dervis was a little surprised, but quickly came to his senses and decided what to do. He leaned over to the Duchess and removed one of her shoes, placing it on the ground. The leg was indeed motionless and numb, so I began to carefully massage it. Rosalind felt a little better, but decided not to show it. Looking up at Dervis, who was barely holding back his laughter, she admitted that she herself was shocked by what was happening. When she felt better, the prince fooled around a little more, not giving her the shoes. Finally, he handed her her boot and asked if it was true what Sonia had told her about this place. Rosalind lied that this was true. It would be better to avoid unnecessary suspicion. She couldn't say that she read it in the novel they were currently in. Rosalind decided to change the subject and said that she wanted to make a deal with Duchess. The Duchess suggested that he find out where Baron Rondel was hiding his dirty money. Duchess was pleased with the idea, but he was curious about what Rosalind was up to. The Duchess explained that she wanted to strengthen the Imperial Guard on the Novicha Road. Duchess realized that she had an important product that needed to be obtained from the Countess, and it's also not hard to guess that she doesn't want her name mentioned. He admitted that he is the kind of prince who runs away from the palace and fools around, so he proposed another deal. The next morning, he woke up as if nothing had happened. When he had tidied himself up, the eldest son of the Bright family came into his room. Benny K brought the documents that the prince had spoken about earlier. Bright personally managed them, so no one knows anything about them except him and Duchess. Considering that this was exactly what the prince had asked for, he was pleased with his comrade's work. Everything was going as the Duchess had said, but Duchess hadn't thought it would take so long. He asked Bright to continue his research and be careful not to show up anywhere. The prince glanced over the documents again. Satisfied that everything was correct, he placed them in his desk drawer. The inside was empty, except for a black medallion with a green emerald in the middle. Slamming the shelf shut, he started talking about expeditions to the Novet Road. Duchess wanted to join. This surprised Benny K. After all, the prince had never liked such expeditions before, as they always bored him. But Duchess explained that now he had a reason to go there, and not be bored. It concerned another deal he had made with the Duchess that night. He didn't tell her exactly what it was, which worried Rosalind, but the prince said it was worth it. Meanwhile, the Duchess and Aaron were just getting ready to go to the city to see the crossbows. In the corridor, they met Iart, who was heading to the library. Watching his dialogue with Aaron, Rosalind noticed how close the two had become while she was in the capital. They invited him to go with them, since he hadn't even been able to properly see the city. Rosalind was also in favor. He hadn't been able to rest properly all this time, so she wanted to buy him some kind of gift. Iart had no choice but to agree to this proposal. The road went well, the weather was warm and sunny, and now they were already at the forge. Rosalind took up testing the crossbow in practice and began shooting at a target. The Duchess noticed that the aim was a little off, but asked that the targets be moved. They should be further away and stand at different distances from each other. Aaron tried to dissuade her, saying it might be too difficult, but for Rosalind, it was easy. Once the targets were in place, the Duchess took up her stance and took aim. She knew how to handle such things, so she fired confidently. Within a couple of seconds, each target had an arrow in it, stuck right in the middle. Everyone was shocked by her skill, but Rosalind didn't pay any attention to it. This time the sight is better than last time, so it needs to be reset. The Duchess asked the blacksmith Gilbert how many finished weapons there were at the moment. Coming to, he replied that it was almost all over, so Rosalind asked Aaron to do one last check. The knight went with the blacksmith to the workshop, and the Duchess went a little further to rest. Meanwhile, Iart remained for another minute on the weapons testing field, examining the targets. He was amazed by the Duchess's strength and precision. She pierced the target, which was incredible. After a while, she and Aaron met in the workshop. Rosalind, however, didn't like the heat and stayed outside. Noticing a set of daggers on the wall, he said that it would be nice to make more weapons like that. Hired. Yet didn't know that Rosalind was a master of knife fighting. Then Aaron got a little distracted. He spoke with Gilbert about the exact number of crossbows. Iart guessed their conversation would be lengthy, so I decided not to waste time, and headed to the cart behind the forge where Rosalind was resting. Having learned that Aaron was engrossed in conversation for a long time, she suggested that they take a walk to see the city. The knight will return to the castle when he finishes his work, so they have nothing to worry about. Iart decided not to argue, and simply followed the Duchess to the exit. Walking through the crowds of people, Rosalind was glad that the life of the residents was not so bad. Iart explained that this was because what Bella touched was the property of the ducal family. This worsened the economy and administrative affairs, but the city remained the same since the time of the previous duke. Having said this, Iart thought that he had blurted out something unnecessary, because such words could have offended Rosalind, so he tried to change the subject, saying that thanks to the ducal family's savings, this damage had been avoided. Rosalind asked why he was justifying what he said at the beginning. If Iart says so, then it's true. The most important thing is to overcome this. The guy was charmed by her kindness and looked noticeably weaker. Noticing this, Rosalind offered them a cup of tea. When they reached the cafe, the Duchess asked, Irt to go in first. She needs to go out on something that she said won't take long. And so for the last half hour it's at the table, sipping his tea and waiting for her return. He was thinking about something of his own, when suddenly something caught his attention. 3 guys surrounded the young waitress and wouldn't let her pass. They tried to persuade her to go have fun with them, ignoring her request to stop. Irt couldn't ignore this and stood up for her. He approached the girl and confidently asked them to calm down. But as soon as he took the first step, one of the bandits ordered him to go where he was going. But Irt did not give up so easily, and threatened to call the guards if they did not stop. This time, the bandit grabbed him by the shirt, intending to fix his cute face. He was only too happy about it. The bouncer swung his arm, preparing to strike. Irt had already closed his eyes, expecting a fist to hit his face, but things didn't go quite as the bandits expected. Their plans were interrupted by Rosalie, who had just returned, and as it turned out, just in time. Rosalie flew into the cafe and kicked the bully with all her might, so hard that he lost consciousness. While the bouncer was coming to his senses, Irt lay on the floor and looked at the girl in surprise. Rosalie asked who they were, turning to more bandits. But instead of answering, the hooligans pulled out sharp blades from their bosoms, preparing to attack. Everyone present in the cafes screamed when they saw the guns in their hands. The bandits were already full of desire to punish this girl and were ready to avenge their comrade. But Rosalie was not empty-handed either and took out her daggers. She said they were very brave to draw knives against her, and the fight began. But it was hard to call it a fight. They were residents of her duchy, so Rosalie couldn't just kill them. But there were more humane methods. She hit one of them in the jaw with the handle, causing him to immediately fall to the ground. And for the second, she decided to use her opponent's weak spot. Without further hesitation, Rosalie grabbed the bandit by the groin, causing him to fall down in horror. As the 2 hooligans lay exhausted, the Duchess noticed a crack in one of the daggers. Then she turned to Irt, who sat silently on the floor and watched the Duchess. She extended her hand to him so that he could get up and suggested that he leave. The guy was, as always, fascinated and surprised by the Duchess's strength and timidly agreed. In the evening, when they had already arrived at the palace and were getting out of the carriage, Rosalie stopped him. She handed him a small blue box with a ribbon in the corner. Irt didn't expect anything like this, so he was a little surprised. Carefully opened the box and his eyes instantly lit up. Inside, on a white cushion, lay the string for his glasses. Rosalie bought it before coming to the cafe especially for him. The string was dark green with small stars between the beads, and, in her opinion, it would be just right for Irt. The boy was touched by such a gift. The next day, Rosalie met Naiden in the living room. He ate sweets and told the Duchess that Bella was going to meet the Marquis. Rosalie was disappointed that the Marquis of Windle turned out to be a coward. He was going to strike, but in the end he did nothing. The Duchess pondered this situation, reflecting on his recent sale of the mine. Meanwhile, Naiden decided not to waste time and shoved one of the sweets into her mouth. When Rosalie tasted the candy, she realized it was too sweet for her. The expression on her face was a little confused and irritated, but this only amused Naiden. He licked his finger to make himself look sexier and told her to eat more sweets. After all, sugar makes your head work better, so he handed her another candy. But Rosalie refused the treat, saying that he took it with licked fingers. That's why she didn't want his candy. This answer caught Naiden off guard. He dropped the candy from his hands and began to laugh at the Duchess, and he asked her if it was true that she had never had a relationship, but she didn't answer this, which made Naiden laugh even more. Once he calmed down, they returned to their conversation. Bella would soon return to the duchy. Naiden must go with her to be ready for the Marquis's blow. If war were to suddenly break out, Bella would want to take over the duchy's fortune. Seeing Rosalie's plan, Naiden had another plan, and while she wasn't looking, he kissed her on the cheek. The Duchess moved away from the guy in surprise, and he, in turn, laughed that he had managed to anger her. When the girl was about to call him names, Naiden quickly left, not letting her finish. That same day, Rosalie had her first shooting practice. They must not let go of their crossbows and must quickly set the shooting distance. To help them remember better, they should do one or to push by tubes while repeating these rules. The knight strained and almost fell after the approaches and the training itself. This meant that the special training of the rifle squad was successful, and stability was restored on the Novetta road. Rosalie was constantly busy, so time flew by. Now she had some free time. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Rosalind went out for a walk in the field. She was pleased that she had made such a profitable deal with Duchess. But now, standing in the middle of a wide reed field, she felt lonely. If someone were next to her, she would feel a little less cold and lonely. As if reading her thoughts, Duchess appeared behind her. Since their deal is complete, he should receive the remaining payment. After these words, he took off his jacket and put it on the Duchess's bare shoulders. The wind that ruffled his hair was cold, but his eyes seemed to warm Rosalind. She thanked him for his jacket. Now she really did feel warmer. Duchess said the Duchess enjoys informal meetings, so no one at the palace knows about his absence. Then he took something out of his pocket and handed it to the girl. It was a pendant of movement. It was granted about 300 years ago by the first head of the Duchy of Judith. When the Duchess asked him how he got it, Duchess admitted that he had stolen the pendant. In any case, the ministers of the imperial palace did not even notice his disappearance. Moreover, Duchess knows how to skillfully get rid of traces, so there is nothing to worry about. So Rosalind returned to the topic of payment. The prince wanted her to provide him with a place to laze around. The girl guessed what he was getting at the duchy. Although when she said this, Duchess didn't nod so confidently. Close your eyes to the fact that he is leaving the palace and coming to have fun in the duchy. Duchess expected that this would be no trouble for Lady Judith. Rosalind agreed that his visits to the duchy would remain secret. They were silent for a moment. Rosalind gazed into the prince's sky. Blue eyes. She froze for a second, as if realizing how beautiful they were, and then she said that his eyes were clear, like the sky. Duchess asked her if she liked clear weather, but Rosalind preferred cloudy days. This phrase of the Duchess prompted the prince to one thought. She looked up at her blonde hair and said she looked better on a sunny day. Rosalind wasn't expecting such a compliment, but she was pleased. She closed her eyes for a second and breathed in the fresh air. It was such a frivolous joke amused her. When they separated, Rosalie gave the prince his jacket. While undressing after a walk, he found a blade of grass from the field in his jacket pocket. Such a small thing as a field spike could remind him of those feelings and freedom. The next time Duchess was reviewing the documents, Belle came in to see him. The maid said that during the day, while he was away, Count Min's daughter came to see him, waited to contact her. When the prince returned to the palace, Duchess thought that in order to go to the duchy, he needed to sort out some business. He couldn't waste time meeting with Sonia, so he asked Belle to tell him that it would be difficult for him to see her for a while. After some time, when the maid had already left, the prince heard a noise outside the door. When he went out to check, he saw Sonia in the corridor, who was very glad to see him. She asked if there were any difficulties with the expedition since he was so busy that he could not see her. But Duchess explained that these were simply urgent matters. He repeated that he would not be able to meet with her for some time, which caused Damons to turn suddenly pale. Coming to her senses, Sonia asked if all this was because of Rosalie. The thought that the countess had done something wrong filled the girl with malice. Amin said that it was all because of the sudden change in her character. After all, the Duchess didn't even listen to her advice. Amins wanted to say something else, but the prince interrupted her. He made it clear to Sonia that she should stop this performance. He advised her to clear her head, and they could talk later. Sonia did not expect such behavior from him, and rushed after him. She gently took Duchess by the sleeve and began to justify her words, but he didn't want to listen. The prince turned around and took Sonia's hands. She was very glad that she still wanted to listen to her, but instead he removed her hands from his sleeve and said that they would see each other when he was finished with his business. And then he turned around and went into his office while Sonia tried to come to her senses. She remained standing behind the door, as if in the darkness where he had closed it. Amins believed it was all because of Rosalind. After all, Duchess had never been like that with her. She hated the Duchess because she took all the prince's attention. It irritated her that Rosalind dared to express her opinions so arrogantly, and on top of that, she was angry that Bianca was sucking up to her. Mins irritated Rosalind with her changes and behavior. After all, it was she, in Sonia's opinion, who was the first to betray and the first to become suspicious. But Rosalind didn't think much about Miss Amins. She was discussing training with Aaron. The training of knights and archers proceeded without any problems, which could not but please the Duchess. When Aaron took his leave, the girl went into her room, where she discovered an uninvited guest. Duchess was dozing peacefully on the sofa. Rosalind peered at his sleeping face. He looked handsome, to the point that the Duchess lost all sense of reality. She sat down next to the sofa and watched his beautiful sleeping face for a while, but the peace did not last long. The prince suddenly grabbed the Duchess by the hand and looked at her with a calm gaze. He was not asleep after all. He noticed how she was staring intently at his face, so he decided that she wanted to look and admire him a little longer. But the Duchess only dryly replied that she had already seen everything, after which they simply remained silent. Rosalind looked into his deep dark blue eyes, and a thought came to her. She hadn't looked at the sky even once today, even though the weather was beautiful, but she couldn't even do that. When she looked up at the window, someone blocked her view. Duchess turned her face towards him and said that the Duchess should look only at him. He would have held her cheek for a long time if not for an unexpected knock on the door. When they heard Doran, all the romance quickly faded. After all, no one should know about the prince's presence. Rosalie asked the butler not to enter the room, under the pretext that she was changing. Duchess wanted to ask if she was seriously planning to undress here, but the Duchess pressed her finger to his lips, since everything could be heard through the doors, and asked Doran what had happened. The butler said that Madame Bella would arrive at the estate soon. That was all the news, so after that he left, leaving the couple alone in the room. Rosalind removed her finger from the prince's lips and breathed a sigh of relief, but not for long. Duchess opened his mouth, took the Duchess by the wrist and placed her finger back on his lips. Rosalind asked what he was doing, to which he explained that he was just being capricious. The Duchess took her hand back and said that he was no longer at an age to behave like that. Then the prince rose from the sofa to a sitting position, and their lips were unexpectedly close. Seeing this, Rosalind asked him to move away, and the prince, without resisting, obeyed. And then he told the Duchess that whims are determined by desire and mood, not age. After that meeting, Rosalind realized one thing about Duchess: he was too unpredictable. Several days passed. The day was, as usual, sunny and warm. The Duchess walked through the courtyard of the palace in her usual training uniform. Rosalind had just finished training the knights, so she was now able to take a leisurely stroll. On the way, she met Diet, who was on his way to complete the paperwork for the sale of the mine. Hearing this, the Duchess was pleased with his productive work. He had truly done a good job. She placed her hand on his shoulder and praised Diet for his work. Was pleased to hear this. He thanked the Duchess, and she went about her business. But there was one detail she didn't notice: someone was watching this scene from the window. Rosalind was pleased that the mine was sold for a better price than expected. As she entered the room, she met the one who was watching her and Diet. Duchess was standing by the window, but noticing the girl, he went to meet her. Rosalind didn't understand what was going on and silently waited for the prince to take action. She was ready for a lot, but when he took her hand and placed it on his shoulder, she looked at him questioningly. There was jealousy in his gaze, but he justified himself with his usual whim. Ignoring this, Rosalind took her hand back and said that she needed to step away for a while. She was going to the mountain, to a remote and abandoned place in the duchy. Hearing this, Duchess took it as an invitation, and, without accepting refusal, followed her. And so, after some time, they were already walking between the trees and rocks, the two of them. Their task was to paint targets throughout the forest to train the shooters. Duchess was impressed that she came up with such training methods. Ignoring his comment, Rosalind handed the prince a bucket of red paint and a brush. Since he followed her, he'll draw too. At least it'll be more interesting that way. Duchess didn't mind, and they got to work. After drawing a few, he noticed the Duchess thinking. She wanted to draw a target on the tree, but she couldn't jump there because of the height. Duchess took this as a request and decided not to delay and show his abilities to the Duchess. In one smooth and swift movement, he jumped onto one of the nearby tree branches. Rosalind was surprised at how easily he found himself several meters above her. Meanwhile, the prince, as if nothing had happened, took a brush and painted a neat target, and then, just as easily and naturally, he jumped to the ground, announcing to the Duchess that the work was completed. But as he approached her, he became a little embarrassed. She didn't move. Then, stretching slightly, Rosalind carefully reached for the prince's hair. She took a piece of paper off him. Duchess hadn't expected this, so he was a little embarrassed. But the Duchess did not pay any attention to this, and asked how he was able to jump so high. Seeing her interest, Duchess decided to show her visually how it happens. And so, with one easy movement, he picked up the girl in his arms. Leaning a little closer, he asked her not to move. It could be dangerous, so she shouldn't say anything. After these words, he jumped again, and now they were already on a tree branch quite high above the ground. But that wasn't what amazed Rosalind. The view from there was indescribable. Duchess lowered her into the tree and put his arm around her. With her, he constantly sees beautiful landscapes. Rosalie didn't like to admit it, but when she was with the prince, a pleasant breeze blew across her. After admiring the view for a while, they went back down. Already standing on the ground, Duchess held the Duchess in his arms for a little while longer, which was very sweet. Standing up, Rosalind said she had one proposition for the prince. He could play hide and seek with the knights of the duchy. Duchess must wear a cloak and mask and hinder the students. The prince agreed to participate, but using magic as a cover. It was the one with which Lee Yoon-ah changed the color and length of his hair. After that walk, she was just about to meet him. While sitting in the room and drinking tea, Lee Yoon-ah came through the balcony, although late. He justified it by saying that Bella was obsessed with him, making it difficult for him to break away. But there was good news too. She took Lee Yoon-ah to meet the Marquis of Wendell. He took the bait, and in 3 weeks will declare a territorial war. And this couldn't help but please Rosalie. Lee Yoon-ah asked if he would have to kill Bella and the Marquis, but the Duchess didn't allow it. After all, this war is her very goal. Hearing this, the guy was a little surprised and tried to hold back his laughter, but still couldn't. He found such a ridiculous goal amusing. When he calmed down, he added that Bella would return to the estate tomorrow. She plans to steal the ducal family's property, so he needs to keep an eye on her at all times. But Lee Yoon-ah moved a little closer and began to complain about the unbearable smell of her perfume. Rosalie was uneasy about the boy's approach, so she warned him. If he did something like that time, he would regret it. But Lee Yoon-ah did not give up. He had a headache and asked the Duchess to stroke his head for at least 5 minutes. Rosalie only agreed to 3 minutes as a reward for her spy. Stargate practice day on the mountain. Their task is to find and hit the targets. The one who finds the most targets will receive a prize. The knights were doing well. They didn't have much time, so they worked quickly. Rosalie watched their progress from behind the trees. She was pleased with the students. They knew the area well and were skilled with crossbows. Walking under the canopy of foliage, the Duchess remembered that day. Come to think of it, she could replicate Duchess's jump. Rosalie stood under the tree, found a suitable branch and concentrated. A light wind blew around her, and she immersed herself in the sounds of the forest. Having gathered her strength, the Duchess did not change her mind about jumping. She jumped higher and tried to repeat the prince's movements. But something went wrong. The body behaved differently and lost its orientation. The recoil was stronger than she expected. Now Rosalie was simply flying to the ground. She resigned herself to it. At best, she'd just break a bone. But then she froze in the air, and a blue aura appeared around her. Duchess appeared behind her, holding her by the waist and telling her that she could relax. As she fell to the ground, she hit and broke a branch that could have caused injury. As soon as they landed, Rosalie immediately turned to the prince and asked how he was. But before she could finish, Duchess grabbed her face and asked if she was hurt. The Duchess replied that it was she who should be asking if everything was all right. The prince took this as an answer that everything was fine and breathed a sigh of relief. He hugged Rosalie, who was lying on top of him, to his chest. He was glad that everything was okay, and then he said that she couldn't be left alone for even 1 minute. Rosalie replied that she hadn't thought it would happen. If he got hurt somewhere, she would make up for it, but Duchess said he was fine, and he just wanted to lie there together. Then, as he began to rise, the prince felt pain and yelped. Realizing that something was wrong, she ordered him to quickly take off his shirt. It turned out that he had a huge bruise on his back. When Rosalie asked why he wanted to hide it, he explained that he was enveloped in an aura when he fell, so there's no serious damage. Exhaling, the Duchess took out some ointment and began rubbing it on his bruise, but it didn't last long. A couple of minutes later, the couple heard footsteps. If anyone sees them, they will be in a difficult situation. At first, Rosalie didn't understand what he was talking about, but when she came to her senses, she agreed. Still, the picture of Duchess sitting on the ground with a bare torso and the Duchess rubbing his back is not very familiar, so the prince pulled the girl closer to him and hid behind a rock. Rosalie thought how awkward it would be if they were seen like this. Moreover, it is entirely possible one of the knights was approaching their stone. Seeing the ointment on it, he assumed that someone had gotten hurt. If the knight approaches the stone even a step, he will be able to see the prince and the Duchess. Rosalie was already trembling a little with excitement as Duchess held her close, and everything would have already happened if the knight had not been called by his comrade. He reminded them that this was no time to fool around. After all, whoever found the fewest targets would be punished by the Duchess. Remembering Rosalie and her devilish training, he really didn't want to get punished. The knights left together, leaving the couple alone behind the stone. The Duchess breathed a sigh of relief and came out from behind the stone, telling the prince to spread the rest himself. Duchess came up to her from behind and handed the jar of cream into her hands, and then he took his shirt and quietly left. And Rosalie remained in the forest for some time, simply thinking about what had happened. Since she already knew about Bella and the Marquis's plans, it was worth telling others about them. The Duchess called Ayardiat, Doran and Aaron into her office and warned them. Soon the Marquis of Wendell will declare territorial war on Judith's family. Now the servants understood why she had so persistently trained the knights and managed the mine. After winning the war, they will receive the deed of mine. And according to Rosalie's calculations, this event should revive Judith's duchy. But Iardiet asked if the lady was confident of their victory, but the Duchess confidently replied that she was putting the honor of her family on this. Later, she will discuss military strategy with Aaron and the estate with the butler. The servants were impressed and motivated by the Duchess's confidence, so they happily agreed. In the meantime, Rosalind wanted to talk to Iardiet. Once Aaron Knight and the butler had left, the Duchess and the administrator sat down to a cup of tea. Rosalind offered him to leave the kingdom if he wanted. He is not obligated to show loyalty like Aaron and Duran, who have long served Judith's family. She wanted to say something else, but stopped. Looking up, Iardiet was still sitting in front of her, but something was wrong. He was crying. The boy stood up and said that the Duchess was caring. Therefore, he does not need such courtesy, because he will remain in the duchy. After such emotions, Rosalind let him go. Iardiet felt ashamed of himself in front of her. He had a rumpled appearance and tear-stained eyes, which one person noticed. In the corridor, he was stopped by Bella, who was acting mockingly. She said that making a person cry was something only Rosalie could do. Bella was counting on his resentment towards the Duchess and wanted to propose a plan for revenge. She put her hand on his shoulder and wanted to pull him to her side. Iardiet wasn't one of those. He walked away from the lady, covered his nose with his hand, and asked her to move away. He explained that he was repelled by the unbearable smell of her pungent perfume, which even Naiden could hardly stand in her presence. Hearing such a remark, Bella was speechless and started a scandal with the administrator. Several knights who were passing by came to the noise and wanted to help. One of them stood in front of Iardiet and asked her to calm down, but the lady rewarded him with a slap. She called him an ill-mannered boor who didn't dare speak to her like that. Bella shouted that they should know where their place was, since they were knights and commoners. But, unfortunately for her, Rosalind came to the noise and asked what she was doing with her subordinates. Upon seeing her, the lady began to accuse her of not teaching them how to behave properly, and in general, how could they hire some commoner for the role of administrator? When the Duchess was tired of listening to this, she grabbed the lady by the hand, which she was waving in front of her. Rosalind asked, since her hands had not done anything good for a long time, what use were they? Bella began to beg to be let go and not to hurt her, after which she fell to the floor. The Duchess said that if she tormented her people one more time, she would actually break her arm. Frightened and embarrassed, Bella rose to her feet and silently went to her room. Turning to that knight, she asked him to tell Duran about this so that he could help him. Now he and I were alone in the corridor. The Duchess praised him for his honesty and courage. After all, not everyone would dare make such a remark to the formidable Bella. But when she was about to leave, the guy stopped her. He told her that he didn't want to work anywhere else, so he would stay. Rosalind was pleased to hear that from Iardiet. He said he would look forward to her return victorious, and she, in turn, will make sure that he does not have to wait long for her. Since Rosalind is caught up in the novel, she will not allow events to unfold as in the original story. She promised herself that she would definitely win this cruel war, and take control of the duchy into his own hands, and prevent Bella from destroying it. Now, everyone knew about the upcoming war, so Rosalind continued training the knights. The day has come to level up your stealth skills with the help of a disguised dervish on that very mountain. The student's task is to hit the targets with an arrow without being caught. If most of them are caught, she will conduct one special fun training session with them. The knights were already familiar with this punishment, so they rushed in all directions as soon as the test began. Meanwhile, the prince wasn't messing around either, and was having fun with the boys as best he could. They were playing a kind of catman and house game with complications, and Dervis found this hide and seek quite interesting. But the knights did quite well, aiming accurately and hiding well. After the training, the Duchess praised them for their success and allowed them to go their separate ways. Rosalind also overheard the students discussing the disguised dervish. They called him an emotional's ghost in a mask, which made her laugh a little. When he and Dervis were already at the castle, Duran said that the Duchess had received a package. It was a gift from Madame Bianca, and with it a letter. The butler looked askance at the masked stranger, even though Rosalind explained that he was her acquaintance. And yet, when Duran left, the prince asked again if it was true that the gift was from Bright's daughter. The fact that Bianca was the culprit of that kidnapping haunted him. As it turned out, Rosalind's friend sent the girl a beautiful hair clip. The Duchess explained that she was more pleased with the fact that someone was showing concern than with the gift itself. While she was reading the letter from Bianca, Dervis came up from behind and asked for a hairpin. As a child, he was often bored in the imperial castle, so he often played with his mother's silky hair. It was one of the few happy moments in the palace, so he could do different hairstyles. Rosalie knew about his difficult childhood. The novel only briefly described his mother. Everyone thought that she died due to poor health, but the truth was different. In fact, This was the plan of the emperor's concubine, and Prince Led In is his second mother. They killed De Vries' mother by poisoning her and making it look like an accident. Because of this and the incident, the two princes inevitably and irrevocably drifted apart. While Rosalind was pondering his past, De Vries had already finished doing her hair. They discussed her aura training a little more, and the prince decided it was time for him to go. After all, one can idle for a long time if one does it in moderation, and he was a professional at this. He put his mask back on his face, leaned over, and kissed his duchess's hand goodbye. The prince went outside to his horse and was thinking about something of his own. Rosalind looked quite surprised, as he thought she was a funny person. His thoughts were interrupted by a young man. At first, De Vries didn't recognize him, but he recognized his voice. Naiden said he could smell it throughout the castle, especially in the duchess's room and office. When the prince asked, he replied that he had decided to become Rosaline's eyes and ears. But Naiden was more interested in why De Vries, who disliked magic so much, was here, but he ignored his question, saying that the boy had always refused to serve aristocrats. After thinking for a moment, Naiden replied that Rosalind was simply a special person. De Vries was surprised by this answer and froze for a second. Jealousy began to slowly fill him. He didn't answer, silently mounted his horse and headed towards the exit. It turned out that he and Naiden had the same goals, and the prince wasn't particularly happy about it. Taking one last look at his friend, De Vries rushed away from the duchy. The sound of his heart was filled with anxiety that he didn't know how to calm. Naiden watched him go for a while longer. He answered without even thinking. That same evening, Doran reported that Rosalie had a visitor. She wasn't expecting guests, so she was curious who it was, although the guest was unexpected. A couple of minutes later, the Duchess was sitting in the living room with Count Inz's daughter. Sonia was calm and looked straight into her soul with her green eyes. Rosalind admitted that she did not expect her to be the first to come to her in the duchies, but Inz explained that she wanted to apologize for their previous meeting. She tried to say something else, became embarrassed and even cried a little. Having calmed her emotions, Sonia said that she was going through a hard time and she wanted to share her experiences. After all, until now she had listened to the Duchess. Now she asked her for a favor. Sophia wanted to talk about De Vries, since Rosalind had become close to him recently. Eamon said she loved him and would like the Duchess to help her a little with it. Sonia thought that Rosalie must understand her situation perfectly. Now their relationship will be like it was before, like she liked it. Sonia and De Vries will be a couple, and the Duchess will simply be their shadow. Meanwhile, Rosalind watched the performance without saying a word, but when Eamon fell silent, the Duchess asked if she was really that unsure of herself. Hearing such a teasing question, Sonia even froze for a second in indignation. Rosalind didn't think she really needed help so much that she decided to pretend to apologize. Sonia looked at the Duchess with a terrible look and said that she was missing her last chance. In an instant, her face changed, and with good emotions she continued, "Does Rosalind really want to lose her only true friend? That is, Sonia?" But the Duchess was already tired of listening to this, and she asked Eamon to simply leave quietly. When she raised her voice at her, Rosalind already threatened with knights. She also gave her ex-friend a chance to leave on her own, and without noise. My condition was that this offer was valid as long as the Duchess counted to 3. Sonia looked at her with a deep gaze, as if into her soul, and tried to somehow intimidate her. But Rosalind ignored this and asked why she was still there. And now it was a battle of manipulators. The Duchess began to count. While she was counting to 3, Sonia was indignant at how she dared to do this. But in the end, trembling with anger, Eamon left the room and headed for the exit. In the corridor, she met the maid Emma, who asked if everything was okay. Sonia trembled with indignation. After all, they had rubbed her nose in it, telling her that she no longer had power over Rosalind. But she instantly calmed down and answered Emma, as if nothing had happened, that everything was fine. The maid, of course, noticed Sonia's irritation, which she saw for the first time. Emma went into the Duchess's room and asked if something had happened to her, but Rosalind replied that there was nothing serious. Emma thought she should stop worrying about little things. Now there was very little time left before the territorial war. Rosalind started waking up early because she was very nervous. After another training session, she sat down under a tree, exhaling heavily. Looking up, it was clear that the day would be sunny, as there was not a cloud in sight. The clear, pure sky, now it always reminded her of De Vries. So the Duchess fell asleep and woke up with a strange feeling. But when De Vries, on whose shoulder she was sleeping, wished her good morning, everything became clear. He came recently, covered her with his mantle, and waited for her to wake up. He said that if the Duchess slept in such a place, she would definitely fall ill. But Rosalind had other things on her mind. She was a light sleeper, but she hadn't even felt his presence, and that was strange. Dervis assumed she must be feeling unwell to have fallen asleep like that. But instead of answering, the Duchess extended her hand towards the prince's face, and then she removed his mask, which hid his appearance quite well. His face looked very surprised. Dervis hadn't expected such confidence, but she explained that it made his face look more familiar to her. Dervis looked at the girl with a loving gaze and wanted to say something else, but he was interrupted. Hearing Doran's voice, Rosalind's expression instantly changed, and she returned to reality. Pulling the mask back onto the guy so that no one would think anything, she answered the butler's call. He explained that military supplies from the Countess had arrived in the backyard. Rosalind promised to come right away. Meanwhile, the prince stared at her. As Rosalind turned and headed into the yard, Dervis was still watching her. Disappointed that their romantic moment was ruined, he slowly pulled off his mask. He was surprised that Rosalind really still didn't understand anything about his feelings, but the girl didn't care. She returned to her work stance and went into the courtyard. The quantity of goods was correct, and the Duchess ordered the knights to use it in future. Besides the weapons, there was a letter and another box. It contained hand grenades. Rosalie opened the letter from the Countess and began to read. This is what it said. Hello, Duchess. Has the item you ordered arrived? This is a new item similar to what you were looking for, so I'm sending it to you as a gift. When your case is over, I think good fortune will come to me too. From Countess Moyer Onstadt. Rosalind previously requested an explosive item for the war. Grenades would be very useful. After talking with Aaron for a while, she asked why all the knights were in such a good mood today. It turns out she's popular after she stood up for a guy in front of Bella. Aaron also said that the ghost in the mask himself admired her. He said he couldn't even move in front of her. When Rosalind heard this, she felt pleased, and then something happened that had not happened before. Leaving the knights in complete shock, she headed to the castle. Everyone was discussing what had just happened and couldn't believe it. For the first time, the knights saw their devilish Duchess coach smile. That same night, Naiden came to Rosalind with a report in his usual way, through the balcony. The first thing he did when he climbed over the balcony was to kneel down next to the Duchess and lay his head on her lap. The girl began to scratch his head. It felt like she was petting a huge cat. Naiden asked what would happen to Bella after the war. The Duchess was planning to kick her out. She was originally the daughter of a poor viscount, so there will be no consequences. Reading Naiden's silence, Rosalind understood what he was thinking and forbade him to kill Bella. He expected her to quickly understand his desire and asked why not. For him it was a matter of minutes, but the Duchess said that Bella was not that annoying. Soon she will take the ducal family's fortune, leave and start a new life where they will never see her again. Until then, Naiden's job was simply to keep an eye on her as usual. The boy sighed that he would be a little sad if Rosalind died, but she promised that this wouldn't happen, so he didn't have to worry. As she began to pet him again, Naiden thought that he would have to meet Dervis again. The next day, the prince, as usual, came to visit Duchess Judith. Lately she has been spending a lot of time in her secret reading room. That's where they met. Seeing the papers on her desk, he assumed she was preparing for war. Rosalind explained that she was looking through old geographic materials. She looked beautiful at work, and Dervis couldn't stop admiring her. But the Duchess sharply looked up at the prince, which confused him a little. She said that she planned to finish her night training, even though it was still early. This meant that he no longer had to help her with training. The territorial war was about to start, and she couldn't allow outsiders to interfere with it. He was hurt by her words when Rosalind called him an outsider, although he believed that they had grown closer during their time together. He asked how she could use it, and leave it like that, and it wasn't just about training. Rosalind replied that he had already helped her enough, and the rest was the duchy's business. Realizing that she didn't understand anything, Dervis put on a mask and said that her convictions were extremely strong. As he was already heading for the door, the Duchess came out from behind the table and promised to reward him. But Dervis said that he didn't need anything and stopped standing in the doorway. He told her for the future that not everything people do is connected with the thirst for profit, and he left, leaving Rosalind alone in the middle of the room with her thoughts. Dervis thought he had almost gotten close to her, but now it felt like they had drifted apart again. He left the castle and was now walking towards the courtyard, heading towards his horse to ride back to his castle. But on the way I couldn't help but feel someone's presence. Dervis called Naiden to him, and he came out of his surveillance position. He heard the conversation between the prince and Rosalie. It's no wonder he has such good hearing. The guy said that Duchess also did not want to put the Duchess in danger. After all, he came to him because he wants the same thing. Naiden needed justification, and Duchess needed Naiden. Their goals were aligned, so that was enough for a successful collaboration. The prince needs someone to look after Rosalie in his absence, and Naiden is just the thing. Moreover, Duchess was being stalked by a pesky rat, and who else but the Empress could have sent a spy after him? Now Duchess, after a long time, wanted to ask Naiden for a favor. They both understood that this would be a very interesting business. Meanwhile, Rosalie was diligently reviewing the old maps and only finished at night. She needed to check the military operations strategy, but she couldn't concentrate. Perhaps it was because of their last conversation with Duchess, but the Duchess believed that this was the duchy's war, and that dragging him into it would be selfish. With these thoughts in mind, a worried Doran burst into her room. It was clear he was in a hurry. He announced that Bella had finally fallen for their trick and was planning to escape. Meanwhile, the woman was already running down the corridor with a servant carrying full suitcases. She ran into her beloved Naiden's room to take him with her to a new life. But it was empty, the lights were out, and the windows were curtained. Naiden had already disappeared, which angered Bella. The maid said they didn't have time. They had to leave quickly. The woman was very outraged that Naiden abandoned her and ran away first, even though he'd said he loved her before. Bella decided to ignore him. They ran out into the street and, wearing their papaque, got into a carriage completely filled with the Duke's fortune. With this money, Bella could start a new life, the one she'd always dreamed of. The carriage doors slammed shut, and the coachman urged the horses towards the exit, away from the palace. But they didn't travel long. Almost immediately, the carriage began to shake. Josalie stopped completely in the middle of the road and couldn't move. There were footsteps outside, then noise. The maid and mistress screamed. Then the doors swung open, and Bella realized what had happened. Their plan was ruined. Rosalie entered the carriage and, in a calm, commanding tone, pointed out and told everyone to get out. In the end, the Duchess's knights pulled Bella out while her maid tried to somehow protect her. Rosalie asked ironically where she was going in such a hurry and asked Aaron to open the back of the truck. From there, the knights took out heavy suitcases with stolen goods. Bella yelled at them to get their hands off her things, but they didn't care. Having torn off her suitcases, Rosalie was even surprised at how much she had managed to collect, especially in such a short period of time. But then they heard laughter. Bella started laughing that she hired an assassin who could protect her, and that the ducal rabble of knights will not be able to overcome him. Bella said that if she let her go right now, she would pardon the Duchess. She spoke of Naiden in the hopes that he would appear, save her, and they would escape together. But Rosalie knew this very well. She said that if she considered her knights weak, then she would be upset by this news. It was thanks to them that everything ended much sooner. Bella was in complete shock. Meanwhile, Rosalie's knights looked over her shoulder and told her that she shouldn't look down on them like that. When Bella's last trump card was taken away, she began to resent her, and her maid began to beg for forgiveness. Now the only place she can go is the dungeon in the Duke's castle. She ordered the knights to drag her away in the guise, grabbing the lady by the arms, dragged her behind the bars. Bella couldn't believe what was happening and began calling Naiden for help and hope. Upon learning what had happened, the Marquis of Windle was in complete shock and anger. He, too, could not believe that this stupid woman had been discovered during her escape. She said she would take care of everything, but ended up creating more problems. If things continue like this, eventually they will catch him too, and then he will definitely be executed. To prevent this, Windle ordered an immediate declaration of territorial war, also said to send a letter to the Queen of the Lentil Kingdom, asking for help in the fight against Judith's duchy. He will need help from above to win, maybe not even so fairly. Rosalie had already discussed military strategy with Aaron and the elite Joy Rifle Squad. The Marquis is definitely planning to make a sudden appearance, so they will lead the army up the mountain. The subordinates were surprised that the Duchess wanted to get ahead of the attack of the enemy army, but Rosalie explained that sometimes offense is the best defense. Besides, they'll have the advantage. This mountain range that the enemy will pass through is similar to the area where they trained. The Duchess insisted that this strategy would help them achieve certain victory. She remembered the war seen in the original novel. It would be no different from their battle. After their attack, the enemy will have only half of their army left, and when they have much more advantages in this war, victory will be theirs. On the evening of Judgment Day, everyone was getting ready to leave, and Rosalind was standing in the first training room. Doran reported that he had prepared weapons and provisions in the backyard. The Duchess thanked him and began to say goodbye to Emma, who was already crying from excitement. Having calmed her down, Iardiet called out to Rosalind and handed her a small red box. It contained a dagger crafted by Gilbert from the finest materials. There was also a ring there with which she could summon her weapon with just the power of thought. The Duchess was delighted to learn this. This would be very useful in battle. She looked up and thanked Iardiet for such a gift. The administrator placed his hand on her chest and wished her military success. The day of battle arrived. At the base, Rosalind stood before all the soldiers. She asked if they were afraid. The army hesitantly replied no, but the Duchess saw everything. They were trembling and unsure of themselves. Rosalind needs to boost their morale and calm them down. She said that looking at them, one can say that fear is not akin to them. They are brave knights who have endured these hell-like training sessions, and they still followed her faithfully, no matter what. They weren't going to die just like that. After all, that's not why they became knights. Each of them has beloved families, parents, brothers, and sisters, the houses where they grew up, studied, and enjoyed life. They are all standing here to protect the lives of the people they love. They go to this war as honorary knights of the Duchy of Judith. After this speech, Rosalind asked again if they were afraid. Such words aroused in the knights the desire to fight for their loved ones and win for them. The army raised its hands and shouted, "We are not afraid!" now cheerfully and confidently. With this attitude, taking weapons, supplies, and water, they set out on their journey. In the clear blue sky above their army, the green flag of the Duchy of Judith fluttered. The squads of horsemen, both in armor and robes, marched in a friendly formation, ready to win. The clerks, the chief gunners, and Rosalind herself rode ahead. They set out. In the evening, when it was already getting dark, they reached a fork in the road where they were supposed to split up. Aaron and Rosalind led their troops in different directions, and they will meet at a crossroads. After wishing each other good luck, each went their separate ways. The Duchess planned to spend the night in a nearby village. By reducing the weight of the load, they can maintain endurance. The new small bags could hold food, arrows, and grenades. It was definitely worth the money. Rosalind also had a hair clip from Bianca there. If she is forced to use it, it will cause a lot of stress. Arriving at the village, Rosalind sent the knights to rest, and she herself sat on night watch. So she sat all night by the fire, guarding the territory. But the Duchess was too tired, so perhaps she didn't notice one thing. She was being watched. Someone was sitting in a tree not far from the fire and watching closely. But, despite this, the night passed quietly, and at dawn the army moved out. They reached the cliff, and a beautiful view of the enemy camp opened up before them. They haven't had time to wake up yet, and can be easily attacked. Just as Rosalind had hoped, Joy pointed out that there were more opponents than they expected, but that didn't matter. The Duchess took the crossbow and ordered everyone to take their positions. The plan is for the Beta team to wait and cover the Alpha team, which, at Rosalind's signal, throws grenades at the enemy army. Everyone stood in their places and held their breath, waiting for the command from the Duchess. She was the only one on the Beta team. Rosalind took up position, leveled her crossbow, and took aim. There were several people standing in the middle of the camp. She needed to kill one of them. In an instant, the first arrow flew out from under his fingers and hit one of the men straight in the head. After opening fire, Rosalind gave the command to Alpha Squad to begin the fight. At one moment, all the soldiers threw their shells forward and attacked. The people below were in shock and did not understand what was happening. But when the grenades reached the ground, it was already too late. There was a huge explosion, and the vibrations from it spread throughout the entire mountain. The soldiers there began to scream about the invasion and run for their lives. Rosalie sent an Alpha team after them to catch them. The Beta team must hold their positions and continue to attack. Their army must deal with everyone before sunrise. A surprised Joy stood next to the Duchess. He was struck by how bound the enemy army was, but Rosalind brought him back to reality and ordered him to pull himself together. Joy was in charge of the other side of the battlefield. Now he was confident of their victory. Then they and the Duchess noticed a detachment of enemies that was rapidly approaching them. Rosalind didn't lose her composure and ordered Joy to throw the grenade towards the cliff. Instantly fulfilling her order, the guy aimed the projectile and threw it with force to the side. Meanwhile, the Duchess loaded and raised the crossbow, and then, taking careful aim, she fired so that the enemies didn't even understand where she was shooting. But when they looked up, they saw a grenade pierced by an arrow. The bomb exploded right next to the mountain and killed all the enemies nearby. Smoke was billowing from everywhere. Looking around the field, Rosalind thought they were almost done. She asked Aaron to gather the knights, and she went to search the surrounding area. The forest was quite dense, The Duchess walked carefully between the tall trees. There wasn't a soul around, but she still noticed something: the body of an enemy soldier, lying motionless on the grass. It was all covered in wounds, and from them one could tell that it was an unusual sword. This was done by an experienced man with great ability in the art of fencing. But whatever kind of warrior he was, the question remained who he was. If he kills the enemy army, then he was on the side of the duchy. But then, Rosalie noticed a familiar silhouette in front of her, and everything became a little clearer. He stood with his back to her, so the girl was the first to call him over. Naiden jokingly admitted that he had been caught and greeted the Duchess. He asked not to stare at him and explained that he had only come here because he had been asked to do so. Rosalind wanted to respond, but didn't have time. Her gaze focused on someone behind Naiden. She raised the loaded crossbow and ordered him to step aside. Soon as she fired, the enemy knight who was running towards them with a sword fell to the ground. Seeing her skills, Naiden thought that perhaps he and Dervis had been worrying about her for nothing. Rosalind tried to get the guy to tell her who sent him to her, but he didn't want to tell. Having resigned herself to his stubbornness, the Duchess ordered him to return as quickly as possible. But Naiden said that he could really go back if he had gone so far. But Rosalind replied that if that were the case, then he could indeed die. She was about to leave, but he didn't let her do it. The guy came up to her from behind and said that it would be an honor for him to die next to her. Then Rosalind raised her hand as if pushing him away and said that war is not a game. Seeing her confidence and composure, Naiden froze for a second. For the first time, he felt underestimated, and hearing it from Rosalind was a blow. Then, Naiden came right up to the Duchess and asked if she doubted his abilities. She just stood there with her usual stony face, waiting for him to continue. Naiden continued. Didn't his powers surprise her? After all, she doesn't even try to use them. Rosalie used him as a watchdog for Bella, although she could have done more. Naiden said that right now he could sneak in and kill the Marquis. And not only him, but also everyone whom Rosalind wants to kill. The girl stood and thought about this, whether it was a confession or a proposal. Having formulated her thought, she replied that she did not know what answer he was expecting, but she's more comfortable acting alone, that's all, so he shouldn't interfere. Having said this, Rosalind turned around and headed back to camp. Naiden watched her go sadly. He hadn't expected her to reject him for such a simple reason. After standing for a while, Naiden decided not to give up. Sometime later, when Rosalind returned, Joy reported that the general meeting was complete. The Duchess ordered that the seriously wounded be sent back to the castle, while the rest would continue the offensive. Adu wasn't against the plan, but he asked who the person behind it was. Rosalind already guessed who he was, so she replied that he was someone who shouldn't be here. Naiden replied that the Duchess was as prickly as ever, while Joy meanwhile went to the knights. In the evening, when everything had calmed down, Joy said that there was not much time left until victory, but Rosalind replied that she couldn't be sure of that, because nothing has as many variables as war. The chief gunner wanted to say something, but he was interrupted. A carrier pigeon landed on his shoulder with a message. It was from Captain Aaron and said that the offensive was progressing without problems on his side. Rosalind planned to join him tomorrow. She asked everyone to get some rest. This also applied to Naiden. The girl suggested he stay overnight and return tomorrow, but he replied that he would prefer a place a little further away, without noise and people. Rosalind knew about his hearing, so she didn't try to persuade him. Naiden chose a place to spend the night in the forest, on a tree branch. There was a beautiful view from there that made you think. For the first time, Naiden tried to protect someone rather than kill them, but something interrupted his thoughts. He heard the sound of energetic footsteps and a slightly increased heartbeat. Only one person had them. Naiden looked down and asked Rosalind what was wrong. The girl was just looking for him, but because he was on a tree, she didn't notice him right away. Seeing Naiden, she threw him a blanket and asked him to accept it. It has warming magic cast on it, so he will be warmer under it. Rosalind invited him to come to breakfast the next morning, turned around and left silently. Naiden, as soon as he realized what had just happened, hugged the blanket to himself. The nights were indeed cold. He felt incredibly warm and comfortable. The next day, Rosalind set out with her squad, and soon they arrived at the camp of Aaron's army. Everyone was glad that the Duchess arrived safely. She dismounted and asked what their current situation was. Aaron replied that reports indicated that the enemy army had advanced beyond the forest. Rosalind realized that they would soon come face to face with them, but they were ready. On the day of the battle, the Duchess came out in front of all her knights. She ordered everyone to take up their battle positions and prepare for a territorial war. And then one of the sentries reported that 2 knights from the enemy army were approaching the tower. Rosalind was surprised. They had expected at least twice as much. Looking out the gate, she indeed saw 2 horsemen with white flags. One of the commanders-in-chief said that it seemed that due to the difference in the number of soldiers, they decided to surrender. But Rosalind replied that there was no point in being so careless. Everything could change in an instant. Together with several knights, she went out to meet the uninvited guests. They came from the Marquis of Wendell to convey his orders. He shows them great generosity. If they surrender right now, he will spare them. The Duchess needed to raise the white flag and capitulate so that this war would not start. While the enemy messenger was finishing reading the message, Judith's knights asked what he was talking about. Rosalind raised her hand and asked Joy to give their guests gifts prepared especially for them. Reeking the hint, the shooter raised his loaded crossbow forward. He aimed an arrow at the enemy knight, took aim and fired. And in an instant, the messenger flew off his horse with an arrow sticking out of his chest. It passed through the Marquis's letter and the knight's armor, and he fell lifeless to the ground. The accompanying enemies began to shout, for what was she allowing herself to do in the country of the Marquis's army? But Rosalind, with a calm face, asked what was wrong. Actually, didn't she respond succinctly enough to the Marquis's offer to surrender without a fight? Taking his comrade by the shoulders, the other knight said that they would regret having responded to the Marquis's generosity in such a way. He threatened that their army would cut the ground from under their feet and make them regret it. After they left, Aaron asked if they should take their words seriously, but Rosalind remained calm and did not know what to answer him. Meanwhile, the enemy knights arrived back at the camp and reported what had happened to the Marquis. Wendell, having learned that the knights sent to the Duchess returned wounded, his desire to fight increased. He ordered an immediate attack on the camp of the Duchy of Judith. After the ducal camp drove out the enemy knights, a whole army soon appeared. From beyond the horizon came the Marquis's army, fully prepared for battle. Rosalind raised her hand and gave the command to attack, and her army followed her. Thus began the battle. Horsemen, swordsmen, and archers fought to the death, and so far, Judith's army has been winning with both numbers and professionalism. Joy aimed accurately at the enemies, and killed knights with his arrows in a matter of minutes. Aaron also did not lag behind, and swung his sword in all directions, as if killing his opponents with one blow. Meanwhile, the Duchess, although she was fighting, had a slightly different task, and she did it. In an instant, Rosalind found the Marquis of Wendell among the enemy crowd. She chased after him, forgetting about all the dangers. One of the enemy's swordsmen ran at her from behind and swung at her head, but before he could strike, his neck was cut off by someone's sharp, precise blade from behind. Naiden, who hadn't left yet, ordered the dead man not to interfere. He said no one was allowed to touch Rosalind. Meanwhile, the Duchess had already caught up with Wendell, and he fell from his horse, falling to the ground. He began to rise to his feet and look back at the person who had knocked him down. The Marquis was surprised to see Rosalind. She asked him what he would do now. The girl was ready to listen carefully to what he would answer. Wendell's face was full of fear and shock. Until a certain moment, he instantly smiled and pulled out a staff with a dark pink gemstone on top. The Marquis said it would be better if the Duchess simply gave in. What is signal? Reinforcements from the Lentil Kingdom will arrive here. It was treason, because he involved outside forces in their territorial war. But Wendell replied that he would simply destroy the entire duchy and the evidence along with it. And more importantly, he has Her Majesty, the Empress's strongest ally, on his side. Naiden, having heard about his betrayal and threats, decided to intervene in their conversation. The Marquis told Rosalind to surrender right now and also dedicate her pathetic body to him. As point, Naiden could no longer restrain himself, and instantly appearing near Wendell, swung his knife to strike, but Rosalind held him back with her hand and asked him to stop. He, although reluctantly, stood behind the Duchess, waiting for her actions. She took out from her bag the very special occasion hairpin that Bianca had given her, but Wendell took it as a paltry attempt at retreat and a price for his life. But Rosalie did not laugh and ordered him to look at the decoration just once. She explained that, using magic, the hairpin could record sounds and surrounding sights, and then send the recordings to the place where her partner is located. Initially, they were used by young people to declare their eternal and pure love, but Rosalie decided to use it to reveal the sins of the Marquis to His Majesty the Emperor. The Marquis was shocked by this move. In the original story, Wendell hadn't involved foreign powers, but the Duchess decided to play it safe in case something changed, and for good reason. She had faced similar wars countless times before, so it wasn't difficult to predict such an outcome. Rosalind said she would pardon the Marquis if he surrendered right now, but she had no use for his pathetic body. If he admits defeat in the territorial war and leaves this place, she will spare his life. His betrayal will remain a secret, and whether he brings his soldiers back alive is up to him to decide. Worst, he'd send them to execution as traitors. Rosalind was forcing him to choose right now. Wendell couldn't believe that he could be executed just because of one annoying girl. The Marquis's heart beat wildly with excitement, anger, and fear. After a moment's thought, he hesitantly raised his staff above his head and shouted, "For the great Wendell family!" He chose to fight to the end. Rosalind rode up to Aaron and warned him that reinforcements were coming for the enemy. Everyone was about to get ready for a tough battle. when suddenly something caught her attention. Before them stood a huge new army, and at its head on horseback sat His Highness Crown Prince Dervis. He took off his helmet, and his dark blue hair and blue eyes were revealed. The prince asked how the Duchess was doing, while the Marquis stood there in surprise. Rosalie approached Dervis and asked how he ended up there, but the Crown Prince only smiled silently. After all, he couldn't just abandon her so easily. They looked into each other's eyes for a few seconds, during which Rosalie seemed to read his thoughts. "Oh, sir," and replied that he came here to see her. But Wendell didn't seem to appreciate their romance and continued to ask, in surprise, why he was there. Dervis looked charitably at the Marquis of the Hebrew Wendell. The prince said the facts were clear, so he had better stop resisting. The military reinforcements he called for were also suppressed by the imperial family. Now he has officially suffered defeat in this territorial war against the Duchy of Judith, and now he will be executed as a traitor. With these words, Dervis drew his sharp sword. Marquis Wendell was filled with fear and began to crawl away from him and ask him not to come closer. Dervis said he shouldn't have been doing dirty work in the first place. After these words and the Marquis's cries, the prince cut off his head and he quietly fell to the ground. Leaving his bloody body behind, Dervis turned to Rosalie. She seemed to be expecting something from him. The prince decided not to hesitate, approached her, and knelt before her. Everyone around gasped in shock that the Empress's crown prince himself had lowered himself before the Duchess. Dervis, as if he had not heard anything, took the girl's hand and kissed it tenderly, and then he looked up and said, "This victory is yours, Rosalie Judith." After the battle, the army returned to camp with Dervis. It turned out he had been preparing for this for some time. Rosalie thanked him for his help, but she knew she should have come up with a more precise plan. Seeing that she was thinking for a moment, Dervis said that the Marquis had gone too far. He had no intention of stopping her, but the Duchess wasn't offended and said she knew it. Rian came up behind her and asked if she was hurt, to which she replied no. There was a doctor waiting for them in the nearest village, so she ordered them to go there, and the rest of them let them return to the duchy. But Dervis didn't stray far from their conversation. He said that he knew her stubbornness and asked her to tell him if something hurt and not to make him worry. But then one of the knights approached them. The prince must go to the Marquis's castle, and the Duchess was getting ready to return home to those who await their victory. And now a thunderous ovation greeted the Duchess. Doran approached first. He congratulated her on her victory, but Rosalie asked him to postpone the warm welcome. They had wounded men behind them, but doctors came forward and promised to take care of them. Rosalie noticed that these weren't the ones she'd hired, but Naiden, standing behind her, suggested which prince might have sent them here. Before she had time to deal with the doctors, Emma ran up to meet her. She hugged her mistress and tearfully thanked God that she was unharmed. Then the administrator approached them and was also very happy to see them back. Diet bowed and once again congratulated Rosalie on her victory in the territorial war. Everyone was happy. The Duchess approached him, and saying she'd promised to return, patted him on the shoulder. After their return, things became a little quieter, although for some time, everyone in the capital would be discussing Wendell's defeat. Rosalie was sitting in her office when Naiden climbed through the balcony to her. He was surprised to see the Duchess writing messages. She explained that these were letters to the families of those killed in the war, although there were not many of them. Rosalie said she had to send compensation and install a tombstone in the castle. She doesn't want anyone to think they gave their lives in vain. After all, they are someone's children and brothers. Naiden only listened to her in surprise. Then Aaron knocked on the door. He suggested that the Duchess organize a small banquet in honor of their victory. Rosalie didn't think about it, but she agreed for the sake of the knights, who had done a good job. And, having asked Doran to take care of it, she returned back to work. Naiden waited for her for several hours, but Rosalie said that she would rest as soon as she finished. The guy objected that after the war she had never had a proper rest. And no, he didn't follow, because maybe he just heard about it. Naiden said that at this rate she would get sick without rest, but Rosalie replied that she was not so weak that she would get sick from sleeping a couple of hours less. Naiden realized that she would not give up so easily, and decided to take matters into his own hands. And I mean that literally. He stood up and instantly lifted Rosalie from the chair into his arms. She tried to resist, but he replied that due to fatigue, even her blows had become slow. Naiden carried her across the room, and then carefully lowered her onto the soft sofa. Looming over her, he promised to wake her up in a couple of hours, so she could sleep peacefully. Rosalie no longer resisted, and ordered him to wake her up in an hour. She wanted to say something else, but didn't have time. She was truly so tired that she fell asleep so quickly. Naiden looked at her sleeping face and couldn't understand how it could look so stern, but in the end, he simply wished her sweet dreams.